This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, John Tucker in for Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr in as well. Earnings front and center. Incredible news flow today. We start strong with Stephanie Roth here on the American economy. We'll do that in a moment. But there it is, Paul. The earnings juggernaut starts with McDonald's. Global comp sales down 1.5%. That number wouldn't have been that number a week ago.
No, and it's interesting here. It's down 1.5%. The consensus was down 0.7%, so a little bit weaker there. PayPal putting out some numbers a little bit better than expected, so the earnings really kicking off here, Tom. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. This will be the heaviest week for earnings.
Real treat for you for Global Wall Street. 8 o'clock today. Anurag, Rana, definitive on cloud. Mandeep, Singh, definitive on everything else in tech. The two of them together, I'm hoping for in a half hour.
Solid.
We'll see what we can do there, wrapped around their crushing schedules. Rana and Singh coming up in the 8 o'clock hour. Sweeney for the victory there. We say good morning. We're out on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. It's the only way I can afford the medicine for the recent plague is you have to subscribe to the Bloomberg Podcast. Thanks to Paul Sweeney and everyone for stepping in. I just can't say enough about the way we're driving this story forward to November 5th. We're in the Interactive Broker Studios with the Bloomberg Business Flash. John Tucker.
All right, with respect to Dow component, McDonald's sales falling short of Wall Street expectations. A weak spot, international markets like the Mideast. The U.S., a bright spot with growth of 0.3%. Of course, this doesn't reflect any of the recent E. coli scare. PayPal, a beat there on earnings per share. Also, Royal Caribbean fourth quarter adjusted EPS missing estimates. They also lowered their fourth quarter adjusted earnings per share forecast. And D.R. Horton in the pre-market, that's falling after the 2025 revenue forecast. You have a miss there. Also, Ford Motor slumping in pre-market trading. They caution that the full-year earnings going to be at the low end of its forecast. This, of course, the busiest week for corporate earnings. After the close, we're going to hear from Google parent Alphabet. Tomorrow, we get Meta Platforms and Microsoft earnings. Also, a quick look at Bitcoin rising past 71,000 for the first time since June. And among the data this week, ahead of the Fed meeting, jobs report on Friday, that should be impacted by the hurricanes and the Boeing strike. Right now, Dow futures 77 points lower. That's down 0.2%. S&P E-mini futures down 4. The NASDAQ futures 5 points higher. 2-year yield unchanged, 4.13. The 10-year is up a basis point. That's at 4.29. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thank you so much. Red and green on the screen here. We'll have to see how that settles out. The VIX, near 20, 19.98. Let's round that up to 20, Paul. That's easy to do. We're going to start with basics here right now. Stephanie Roth is with Wolfe. And she's just absolutely exquisite in her rigor about the construction of a given 90 days of American economic might. And I got some American economic might with you, Stephanie, but I also got a payroll call of 70,000. Who's the horse and who's the cart? The economy or the job economy?
Well, so on the headline, the 70,000 looks kind of weak. But that's accounting for hurricanes and strikes, which are pretty significant.
So, throw this, can I not work Friday? Wait, it's Paul's turn not to work Friday.
Here's when you'd have to work on Friday. So, we're below consensus on the actual headline number. We think the underlying trend in payrolls is 150,000, so totally fine. Here's where you'd have to work on Friday is if it comes in strong. Because in that case, we've got strength even given we have hurricanes and strikes hitting the numbers. So that's where it could become a bit asymmetric.
All right, but let's strip that away a little bit. How do you feel about the U.S. labor market? How strong is it? Some people are saying, hey, we're fine, 4.1% unemployment, whatever. But some others say, boy, the recent trends are a little testy. How do you feel about the U.S. labor market?
It's kind of wild because we swung from concerns about hard landing to then concerns around, okay, fine, we were having a soft landing. Then it's shifted all of a sudden to no landing. And the result is probably somewhere in the middle. The economy's doing just fine. We have GDP, which is going to print somewhere close to 3%. And the labor market is hanging in there. You have some upward pressure on the unemployment rate, but it shouldn't be that significant. And especially if we do end up with a Trump presidency, he's going to be cutting off a lot of those immigration flows, which will then put a little bit of downward pressure on the unemployment rate versus what would otherwise be the case.
So how are you framing out this election year? I'm sure that's the majority of the calls you get from your clients. What's kind of your response to, hey, Stephanie, how's this going to play out?
So in the first year, it may not actually be as different depending on the presidential candidate. Come 2026, that's where it becomes a very big difference because TCJA, the Trump tax cuts, expire at the end of 2025.
Okay.
So that's going to be where the rubber meets the road in terms of the difference between the candidates.
With this policy wonk, Stephanie Roth of Wolfe, completely off your remit, but I'm going there. Can we have tax modification, lessening of any type, given where the deficits are, given $800 billion interest expense? How do you dovetail those two together?
I mean, it's kind of wild, and really, either candidate is going to increase the deficit. So regardless of the situation, it's going to get worse. But the U.S. is a reserve currency, so we have the ability to increase our deficits relative to other countries.
You sound like Barry Eichengreen at Berkeley. Stephanie Roth, I'm looking at what's happened, folks, since I've not been here. The real yield has exploded out to 2.00%. The price of all this is money's more expensive, right?
Yes. So we attribute the move since the beginning of August, which is kind of when you started to see rates back up. We attribute roughly half of it to better economic growth and half of it to the election. Really, Trump odds starting to rise. Base case is that if Trump does win, the 10-year will back up towards at least 450. If Harris wins, you could actually see a little bit of a downshift in yield, something towards 4%.
Tariffs, do they work? What's your view on tariffs? Because that seems to be a discussion point here in this election.
I'm a big fan of free trade, so not a big fan of them. And I also have to say, it has to be advertised as such, right? It's a tax on the consumer, full stop. Yeah, if you do 60% tariff on China, that could help reduce some imports from China. We did see that in the last trade war. But if you couple that with a 10% universal baseline tariff, now goods are just going to get more expensive. So when we model it, it could be about a 1% headwind on GDP and a 1.1% increase in inflation. So it's really a stagflationary type of policy.
Are we having a sustainable 3% economy? We had one quarter 3%. There's a guesstimate ending September 30, 3%. Is it, dare I say, a Q4 3%-ish?
That's probably a little bit high. I think we're more like a 2.5% economy. Productivity does appear to have picked up in this economy, which is a great thing. That's where you can get non-inflationary growth in the next cycle.
Let's talk about that. Let's fold it in the election. Productivity's picked up. I think 99% of people agree with you, except half of this nation's flat on their back. Does that mean productivity for everybody else is double, while half the nation's flat on their back?
So if you look at productivity by sector, technology has driven a lot of it, probably no surprise. And then some of the areas of the economy that have had to deal with reduced labor shortages, things like retail, leisure and hospitality, they've just become more productive because they had to. Mm-hmm. There were some areas that benefited from the pandemic that overhired, so where it's transportation and warehousing. Those are areas of the economy that are kind of flat on their back from that perspective. So it is very much mixed depending on kind of what sector we're talking about.
How's the consumer out there from your perspective in terms of spending, employment? Pretty solid, or do we have some concerns there?
And we've been talking about cracks at the low end for a while. Yeah. That still is the case. Granted, if rates actually do come down, which they should continue to come down even if we have some election-related volatility, gasoline prices remain muted. Yep. That low-end consumer should feel a little bit better. So base case is the consumer should be fine. They're not over-levered. And the savings rate is actually not so low. That's what we learned kind of over the summer, is that the very low savings rate, at least as was reported, got revised up pretty significantly.
70,000 jobs Friday. Where's the unemployment rate? Stasis?
Stasis.
A lot of noise.
A lot of noise around that.
Stephanie Roth, brilliant. I love starting strong like that. 7 a.m. this morning. Stephanie Roth with Wolfe with this as well. Paul and I are going to talk about McDonald's here in a moment. Futures at -6 with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. The Dodgers, they take Game 3 of the World Series against the Yankees. Los Angeles won 4-2 and are on the verge of sweeping New York. Dodgers coach Dave Roberts.
Our guys are very heady, very hungry for a championship, a parade, and so nothing is going to get in the way of that. Nothing.
Game 4 is tonight in the Bronx. Yankee skipper Aaron Boone.
Hopefully we can, go be this amazing story and shock the world. But right now it's about trying to get a lead, trying to grab a game and force another one, and then on from there. But we got to grab one first.
The Dodgers' Freddie Freeman homered for the third straight game in this series. Vice President Harris and former President Trump are holding rallies with a week to go before Election Day. Harris was in Michigan and Trump was in Georgia.
Either it's Donald Trump sitting in there stewing over his enemies list, or me, with your help, working for you, checking off my to-do list.
Kamala is labeling more than half of the country as the enemy combatants, and she's calling them all fascists and Nazis, okay? But she's a fascist, okay? She's a fascist.
Local and federal officials are investigating a pair of deliberately set fires at ballot drop boxes in Portland, Oregon and Vancouver, Washington. Police say they could be connected. Lebanese militant group Hezbollah announced that Naim Qassem will become its new leader, replacing long-standing chief Hassan Nasrallah, who Israel assassinated just over a month ago. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, and John.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. Crushing news flow. Let's start with McDonald's here. 8 ways to go, Paul. But I'm going to, and this goes back to, I went over there the day of the E. coli thing, and they're all beef. There's no beef anywhere.
Yep.
And I had the fish fillet, brought some back for Greifeld. She's
Nice.
always hungry.
I know.
Katie's always up in the food court, hiding stuff in her pockets. And Tim was here as well, fish fillet, little French fries. And there's the optimism. And the lead headline here is McDonald's sees over 1,600 net restaurant additions this year.
Okay. I mean, I'm looking at these numbers here. I mean, the same store sales, which that's what I'm told we should look at for these restaurant companies, negative again. I think the international business is a little bit weaker here. And these results do not include the impact of the recent E. coli outbreak. So that'll be the next quarter numbers here. But the quarter pounder is back. That's the good news. The bad news is no onions.
So they cut out onions.
Yeah, but that's.
But I always tell them to do that anyways.
Oh, you do? Okay. See,
why don't you cook the onions? Just fry them like I do. They're so much better.
Well,
but that's not the thing.
Will that get rid of
That's not the thing. Yeah, you go to your McDonald's counter and you say number 2 with a Coke. That's it. You can say that anywhere around the world, and you're going to get your quarter pounder with cheese, fries, and a Coke.
There's a fascinating story in the Journal about the McFlurry machines, why they're always broken. Basically, you have to use the company that makes them. You have to use their techs, and it takes them days to show up. So that could
I've
change.
never quaffed a McFlurry.
No,
I'm afraid to ask. Is this like a Starbucks thing?
No, I don't know. This is just what I hear.
McDonald's, they're fine. They've survived far worse than this.
Exactly. And as you pointed out, this is not Chipotle of 2 years ago, 3 years ago. This is a more controllable tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be fine.
Okay, well, we'll see. McDonald's off a couple dollars here, but we got much more earnings coming up. Our people are talking to Mandeep Singh's people. Anurag Rana's people won't talk to us, but we're going to have them in the 8 o'clock hour. A little red on the screen. Futures at -6 on YouTube. Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker, the Bloomberg Newsroom, with this Bloomberg Business Flash being brought to you by BNY. BNY's expertise and insights can help clients achieve their ambitions. Visit BNY.com. Dow component McDonald shares, they're actually teetering between gains and losses, just slightly higher right now in the pre-market after their earnings. McDonald's posting third quarter revenue and earnings, topping the expectations of the street, but the same store sales fell short. A lot of that was on international sales. Pfizer jumping close to 2% pre-market. Drug maker boosting its revenue and adjusted earnings per share forecast for the full year. Ford cautioned that the full year earnings will be at the low end of its forecast. Car maker struggling with warranty costs and supply disruptions tied to recent hurricanes. Its shares, they were down close to 5% of pre-market. And BI's Mike McClone says, watch Dr. Copper. If copper can hold above 10,000 a ton, deflationary hints seen in crude oil, iron ore, grains, and China in decline may be mitigated. Yet if the metal falls, he says it could signal a domino scenario. Right now, Dow futures 126 points lower. The S&P futures, they're down 4. But NASDAQ futures up just about 8 points. 2-year yield 413, the 10 up a basis point. That's at 429. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, John. Greatly appreciate it. What an eclectic show today around crushing news flow. No other way to put it. With an election here, broader thoughts perhaps in order. Joining us now from the London Business School, Richard Portis, who we were thrilled he joined us in studio here in New York recently. He's, to say, professor of economics at LBS, barely describes his contribution of thinking of the big picture. Professor, thank you so much in this moment for joining us. What is the nature and character of our new productivity?
First of all, it's a pleasure to be back with you. Second, the new productivity, I think, is a short-run blip, I'm afraid. And I think if we look forward to try to see reasons for a sustained productivity growth, it's going to be artificial intelligence. But there's so much controversy about whether that really will give us a boost to productivity growth that I think it's very difficult to conjecture. Otherwise, the underlying sources of productivity growth in the United States and elsewhere haven't changed very much.
The fear in this election, particularly led by the Republican candidate, is the have-nots are simply not participating. And of course, in your excellence on Europe, we see VW shutting down 3 plants. I believe it was announcing, Paul, yesterday, the shutdown of 3 plants. Professor Portis, if we look at the laureates, Acemoglu, Robinson, and Simon Johnson, and particularly Johnson's book, Power and Progress, there's a separation going on as there was in England 250 years ago. How do these two candidates attempt to bring the haves and the have-nots together, given technological shift?
You mean the candidates in the United States?
I believe in the United States. That's what we were talking about in New York in Drive Time America, Professor.
Right. Well, the American economy is in pretty good shape. Your previous interlocutor, Stephanie Roth, I think I agree with most of what she said, except that I think she's too sanguine about the consequences of a Trump election. I think it would be a disaster. And bringing the two halves of the country together, that's really a huge challenge. It's not going to happen, certainly, of course, under Trump. But whether Harris could do it, I think is a totally open question. The divisions right now are so great, as far as I can see from over here, with of course, an American perspective, but still, as far as I can see from over here, it's not good. And these divisions have grown and grown over the past few years, have been stoked in part by the MAGA Trump movement. And it's hard to see that turning around.
Dr. Portis, Tom was just mentioning Germany, Volkswagen, potentially closing 3
Germany,
plants.
Germany is a disaster area.
All right,
Germany
so give us.
is going.
Let's explore that a little bit, because as Germany goes, so does a large part of Europe. What's your view of
a large part? We can then turn to France, which is not going so well either. But Germany is going into recession. They desperately need a fiscal stimulus, but they've got this so-called debt brake, which is effectively saying they can't run a budget deficit. This is completely crazy. They've got a relatively low debt to GDP rate, and there's plenty of room for fiscal stimulus. But the finance minister is firmly opposed, and it's hard to see, except unless there's a new election. But then goodness knows what happens, given what the divisions, and you're seeing them in Germany as well, political divisions growing and declining consensus, if you see what I mean. France is also in trouble because of its fiscal position going the other way. France has not got a healthy fiscal position, and the prospects for bringing its budget deficit down in the very messy political environment that has been created by the elections a few months ago, that doesn't look good either. So both the two motors of the European economy are misfiring.
Professor, thank you so much. It's too short a visit today with the news flow we have in American Drive Time, but we have to run. And Professor Portis, we'll do much more with him here moving into the end of the year. He's a professor of economics at London Business School, thinking about manufacturing processes, thinking about the productivity of this strange world. Richard Portis of LBS. Futures at -7. Paul, we got to go. I mean, I've been out of the loop, and the answer is Showtime starts this afternoon with Google.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got a stock that's up about 20% this year. But again, a lot of folks want to get a sense of the risk to Google and Google search from this whole AI thing. And, longer term, what really is the risk to that core search business for Google?
I've just done a little bit here like everybody else. To me, the new AI thing's intrusive. I just want to go to Google search.
Yeah.
I'm not yet, oh boy, joy, AI giving me, John Tucker woodworking expertise.
Yeah, I know. So
Which sandpaper should I use on oak?
Exactly.
It used to be easy. Google search.
You start off with heavy grit, and then work the key is to work your way down.
Really? Work your way down.
Don't just use one sandpaper grit.
Oh, really?
Go from coarse down to very
news you can use. But the answer is with the AI, I got 7 pages of stuff before I get to John Tucker's wisdom.
I know. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it's a lot of folks saying, even the chat GPT is a big improvement for Bing. I mean, Matt Miller is becoming a Bing
You
guy.
do this just to aggravate me.
I know.
I mean, is Bing, is that what we're going to hear from Microsoft on the 30th?
No, I can't imagine. But I mean, Dan Ives, he asked Dan Ives, top pick. Oftentimes he says Microsoft, they're just everywhere. They're there with the cloud, they're there with AI, and obviously their core recurring revenue. So we'll get other big companies.
Shout out to all our guests, particularly those over at Bloomberg Intelligence for an analysis. Gina Martin-Adams, she's been on fire.
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, out on LinkedIn, folks, you got to follow Gina Martin-Adams. She's got the smartest stuff, the summary, if you will, of Bloomberg Intelligence with clearly readable charts. It's just absolutely superb, and she's enthused, right?
Yep, she is. I mean, and she's been pretty positive, Tom, on earnings coming in better than expected. Right. So wherever the consensus is, she says look for the earnings to be better. I mean, that was certainly the case so far this year.
2.00% on the 10-year real yield. That is my front and center single number. The 10-year yield, 4.30%. The Sweeney yield yanks out 2-year yield, 4.14%. Wow. Yep. I mean, it's a new regime.
Yep.
Someone like, Ian Lingan would call that a new regime.
Right. My 10-year treasury, 4.3%. So much for refinancing the mortgage now.
12 seconds. BitDog explodes, I say.
Yep.
Over 70,000.
That gets your attention. That's a big number there.
Is that like the entire 10 o'clock hour?
I think so.
Today?
It might be, yep.
The BitDog hour. We'll have to see on that. On your commute across the nation in the quarter, 99.1 FM Washington, Bloomberg 1130 in hitting deprived New York. 92.9 FM in Boston. Good morning, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Dow component McDonald's now falling pre-market. It was down about 2.6%. Sales falling short of expectations in the third quarter, yet weakness, especially in the international markets. The U.S. actually a bright spot. This earnings report, of course, doesn't capture the E. coli outbreak. Google parent Alphabet out after the close. As we enter the busiest period for the earnings season, 196 companies in the S&P 500 have reported 77%, delivering positive earnings surprises. And finally, Pfizer raising its guidance for the year. It reported adjusted earnings that beat expectations. Shares right now up 1.5% pre-market. The Dow futures down 133. S&P E-mini futures down 7. The NASDAQ futures 4 points lower. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much, John Tucker. Greatly appreciate it. Incredible news flow. And, of course, the earnings were staying on top of McDonald's out and such. And the bond market giving us some tension here about our debt and deficit. Probably that means 3-4 themes with our guest, David Malpass. Many of you will know him as the driving force for Alan Schwartz at Bear Stearns Economics years ago. Of course, his service to the nation at the World Bank for President Trump. And we're thrilled he can join us in the studio now. There's 4, 5, 6 topics, David, we can talk about. You are the rarest of rare ducks. A Colorado College physicist who was so dumb he actually ran for public office. I want to focus on this election. And come on, you're an institutional guy. You can do the foreign policy and all that. Forget about it. What was it like campaigning in Broome County in 2010 against Senator Gillibrand?
Tom, that was an experience for the lifetime. I had the minivan and drove around New York State and really talked about how could Washington actually stop growing. And so there was, remember it was the Tea Party year in 2010. The Senate seat had been Hillary Clinton's Senate seat, and Gillibrand was holding it in 2009 and 10. So I decided to run because I really think that the issues can be changed in Washington. If you have people, leaders in Washington, talking about what to do about the budget, what to do actually about the dollar and keeping it stable, these are important topics.
Most important tweet of the last 24 hours was the wonderful Michael Beschloss, who put out a photograph of a Puerto Rican in a Pittsburgh Pirates uniform. And the bottom line is the rhetoric and dialogue across all parties, but particularly what we've seen in the last 48 hours, is just totally unexcusable. And this guy hired you to run the World Bank. How can guys like you and your lovely wife who ran Manhattan GOP support this guy with the rhetoric we're hearing?
Tom, I'm not into the election itself, but into the policies. And as you look at where the U.S. stands in the world, it's a voice of weakness around the world. It's causing instability all through Africa. Any international meeting I went to, people were almost pleading, saying, can't the U.S. have a voice? And that it's not there. And the policies that are being projected by the current administration and into the future look like they'll be more
Paul wants to get in here. Paul's looking at me like, what is this, a monologue? But I was just in Rome, and I'm sorry, they're petrified of a certain candidate winning here. How does your party, could you run for could you take Secretary of State under a new Trump administration? Would you accept that position?
That's not even a question. Can the U.S. grow more, and will that be stabilizing in the world? And the answer is yes. And is the budget that's now in front of the U.S. Nation from the Biden-Harris administration acceptable? The answer is no. It's an unacceptable budget, and it's not going to lead to growth. They are willing to have the country grow at 1.5% per year with big government. That's their dream of how a country will look.
What will become of the World Bank if Trump wins on Tuesday?
As an institution, it's got its shareholders, so I don't think that would be the focus of change. And the World Bank's not very big within the world scene. One of the things that has to be discussed, the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, the head of the United Nations, just went to the BRICS summit in Russia. Why aren't people talking about that? And did the U.S. protest that? Here he is in Kazan, Russia, with Putin, shaking hands, bowing at the time of a vicious war that's going on in Ukraine. And so how does the world really interact with these institutions that are harming people around the world?
Trump presidency was kind of more, just nationalistic as opposed to internationalism. Doesn't he want to step back from the world stage? Doesn't he want to, how does that project world U.S. influence globally?
Case by case, for one, you don't want to have permanent wars, and it sure looks like we've gotten into a very long-term war in Ukraine and Russia, where we're arming one side and they're arming the other side.
But our boys
That's
are not
unhealthy.
on the field. We're letting the Ukrainians fight our war. Isn't that the best strategy?
Well, no, that's not a good strategy at all. They're dying, and so that's a bad.
But that's their fight. All we're doing is funding it, and we're letting them fight against Russia.
To your question of nationalism, so Trump's been pretty clear that he would pick his fights, and that through deterrence, the U.S. would be a stronger nation. And I think that's a very defensible position to be in. If you say to Putin or to China, we are going to be the strongest growing country, we're going to have the best technology, we're supporting our troops 100%, they're going to be more reluctant to start wars.
The 3% economy that we have, everyone, every political persuasion, every economic persuasion has been shocked by the growth that we've seen. David Malpass, do you equate the growth we have in 2024 directly to the stimulus of 2021, or can we actually say there's a productivity, a technology overlay going on right now?
Some of both, but with the big thing is the government is running a 6.5% fiscal deficit now. This has never happened, where you have a full employment economy and the government doesn't. And so some part of our GDP growth right now is just the expansion of the national debt. The government borrows money, spends it.
I'll go there, David. It's good Colorado College physics. But the bottom line is, do you hear either candidate going on the path of Pete Peterson, Paul Tsongas, and Sam Nunn and getting our debt and deficit trajectories in better control?
No, but to those three people, those were austerity policies, and what Trump is talking about is growth policies. They're very different. That means changing the regulatory policy so that people will actually build things. A giant part of the semiconductor problem right now is you can't build a factory because of the rules that go into that IRA bill. And so they're pumping money into the economy but getting nothing for it. That can all be changed. And that's not as hard to change as people think. It just means sensible decisions at the top in Washington to spend the money less wastefully.
Is there a will in Congress to get that done?
No, to some extent they're part of the problem. That's why I ran in 2010 for the Senate. So they love it when you just spend money, and it doesn't matter if it has effect. But that can change through leadership from the top. We're just not getting it now.
Tell us about money in running a campaign. I mean, I look at, the day-to-day battle of each of the candidates and all that. Out in the trenches, as you were in 2010, are you just basically waking up in the morning and trying to raise money?
Yes, plus I was spending quite a bit of my own money because I really believed in the cause. But the secret, I don't know that it's very much of a secret, is there's corruption across the whole system. How is it that Washington is the richest part of the country? That doesn't make sense. And with them moving up every year on that on the leaderboard, Washington's the big winner.
Right.
And so that comes from campaigning, constant campaigns.
This has been a really successful interview. Everyone that's been listening to it thinks that I'm a piece of garbage floating around the East River. David Malpass, thank you so much for joining us and for a spirited debate here as we go to November 5th. Mr. Malpass, of course, is a former president of the World Bank. Right now, a -7 on futures. The VIX is now out over 20. 20.07, of course, deep into earnings season with McDonald's out. And again, we've got Alphabet coming up this afternoon and on to the technology derby, earnings derby here that we have over the next number of weeks. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. This evening, Kamala Harris will deliver her closing argument in a speech at Washington's Ellipse. Bloomberg's Mike Shepard reports she'll try to draw a contrast with Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden, which has been overshadowed by comments from some of the warm-up speakers.
Trump was trying to create an aura of inevitability around the election and, make it seem like it was his to lose. And of course, we know from the polls, everything is so close. It's neck and neck. Really, every vote counts in every precinct, in every district. And they can't afford to lose any support in some of the key constituencies, as I said, that they've been courting, including black male voters and Latino voters that they've been trying to lure over to the Republican column in larger numbers than historically in the past.
Bloomberg's Mike Shepard in the nation's capital. Former President Trump plans to make some comments to reporters at his Florida home at Mar-a-Lago. That's set for 10 this morning, Wall Street time. The Dodgers take Game 3 of the World Series against the Yankees. Los Angeles won 4-2, and they're on the verge of sweeping New York. The Yankees' Anthony Rizzo spoke after last night's game.
It's not going to be easy for sure, but no, we gotta pull some inspiration from somewhere. So it's happened before, teams come back before, and it's going to sting tonight. But tomorrow when we show up, we'll be ready to play.
Game 4 is tonight in the Bronx. A week after Robert Robertson was saved from the executioner's needle by a Texas House Committee subpoena, a war of words has broken out among members of Robertson's own family. Robertson was convicted and sentenced to die for the killing of his 2-year-old daughter, Nikki, in 2002, a crime he denies committing. Nikki's brother, aunt, and grandfather have admonished the committee that convinced the Texas Supreme Court to block Robertson's execution. They insist he's guilty. However, Thomas Robertson has issued an open letter of his own, insisting that his brother couldn't have hurt his daughter. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
To learn logic theory as a kid, your father would discuss the domestic focus of our World Series. And now, this is ESPN. Thank you so much, ESPN, for doing this. Paul, I know you're up to speed on this, and Michael as well. We have to combine Japan and U.S. TV ratings, and you get out to 29 million large is the working statistic.
Yep. Japan.
Yeah. It's a world, Michael Barr, it's a World Series, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And remember, we kind of dabbled in this years ago because you had the Montreal Expos, so you had over in Canada the stuff that was going on, and of course the Toronto Blue Jays. So yeah, other countries coming in, this is no surprise.
Is Andre Dawson in the Hall of Fame?
I don't know.
He ought to be.
Ari, I'll check. Yes, is the
Thank you,
Ari.
Ari. He looks so cool.
How does Ari know all this stuff?
Because he's an expert on the Expos.
I know.
But I'm looking at this, and you go, okay, Super Bowl, 21 million, 22 million, whatever. But are they watching the Super Bowl in Japan?
I don't know.
It's amazing.
Shohei Ohtani, they're tuning in. Yamamoto.
I can't see a franchise there. I mean, I guess that would be intruding. I don't know. What do you think, Michael Barr?
Well, by the way, tonight, I guess the Dodgers are going to use, quote unquote, all relievers.
Yes.
Why is that? Don't they have a third?
Well, they got to get the repair for the poor guys, the starting pitchers, which could mean that there could be a win for the Yankees tonight.
The bullpen shut out the Padres. Rich.
Yeah, I think it's sort of cool myself, but
okay,
defeatists like Michael Barr would probably think the dreaded Yankees can pull one out tonight. Michael Barr, why can the Yankees win tonight?
It's I know the relievers are great, but still, you're not going against the starting pitchers. I mean, they've been lights out.
Michael Barr, look at the zeros going out 9 innings. Verdugo saved them last night. There's your sports report here on FAN. Good morning. It's Bloomberg Surveillance Worldwide.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. The major stock averages right now pre-market, they are mixed. Let's start with some of the most active stocks. PayPal Holdings, those shares down close to 4.5%. PayPal reporting adjusted earnings per share for the third quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. Pfizer up 1.5% pre-market, boosting the revenue and adjusted earnings per share forecast for the full year. You have Ford shares, they're down 5.5%. Full year earnings will be at the low end of its forecast. And then shares of McDonald's, we heard from them around 7 o'clock Eastern. They're down 2.7%. Sales fell short of expectations in the third quarter. That follows mainly weakness in the international markets. This is, of course, the busiest week for corporate earnings in the U.S. After the close, we're going to hear from Google parent Alphabet. And tomorrow, we get Meta Platforms at Microsoft earnings. Bitcoin rising past 71,000 for the first time
still not
since
in.
June.
Waiting.
And among the data this week, ahead of the Fed meeting, the jobs report on Friday, of course, the Boeing strike and the hurricanes, that will be impacted. So, yes, maybe you can stay home. And right now, Dow futures down 120, S&P futures down 3, the NASDAQ futures up 15. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your... Any interesting emails?
What's that?
That you want to share?
No. We're getting some love notes here after our
Because they're
conversation
even
with David
coming
Milpas.
to me.
You're
Don't send
getting
it to
them.
me. I don't have anything to do with this.
It's like in the old days. Ken Pruitt got the love notes. I get the hate mail, and we're proving that this morning. You're getting my hate mail. It's redounding over to you. As
there's
they
so
say.
much of it. It's spilling over.
Okay, we're gonna have a more centrist interview here with Brian McDonald coming up here with PGIM. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, if you're still listening, and we thank you for that. We're brought to you by IBKR. With Interactive Brokers Forecast Trader, you can trade your views on the 2024 elections. Just answer yes or no. Visit ibkr.com/forecast and get started today. We thank IBKR for foundational support of what we do. This is a really important interview because I find a lot of people in real estate, they're finance guys, 6-5 trust fund, the whole thing. In the nitty-gritty of a legit effort at Northwestern University in civil engineering, Brian McDonald decided to come over to the dark side. He's with PGIM at Real Estate, U.S. Debt Chair, Global Debt. From a civil engineering standpoint, what do we do with all these dead buildings we have?
Yeah, well, thanks. There's a lot you can talk about in the dead buildings in the office market, but in a way, I think that's missing the story. I think the story that we see is one of confidence in the real estate market and whether there's a lack of it or too much of it. And so where we see is the fundamentals in real estate have actually done really quite well if you park office off to the side, right? If you look at multifamily, industrial, retail, they're doing really quite well.
On a civil engineering basis, what are we going to do with these 48-story buildings in 510 Los Angeles? They're going to hold a victory parade, and all the buildings that they're going to be are empty. What do we do with these buildings, civil engineer?
Well, there's a reason I'm in real estate now, not civil engineering. I switched up, right? But again, I think that's a little bit of the narrative that's missing, is that, yes, there's going to be a long-term cycle. We've gone through that in the malls. We've gone through that in other cycles.
Fair.
This will play out over a long period of time. Real estate is a long-term asset class. And yes, there are headwinds that we're facing in there. But outside of that, there's really quite a bit of strength in the market.
How about the credit markets? If I want to go out and develop some real estate, acquire some real estate, who's going to lend me the money to do that?
Yeah, what I think you've seen over the last 3 months has been this dramatic shift in the markets. When the Fed cut rates by 50 basis points, you saw credit markets unlock in a real way.
Really?
You saw banks there, you saw private credit, life insurance companies, everyone. And I think it answers two questions. One, where will the money come from? And how much of these lenders going to be focusing on their capital charges or their challenges in their books? I think it's being answered with they're in pretty good shape. They're playing out. And I also think what's interesting, and this gets back to a little bit to your question, is I think we've entered an income world. And I think it's a big change from where we were. In the last cycle, we were in appreciation or a leverage world. That's what drove returns in real estate. We're now in an income world. And in an income world, credit does really well. And so I think you're going to see credit play quite strongly in this next cycle. And I don't think you're going to have a shortage of the ability to finance properties.
Private credit versus the banks. I used to go, if I wanted to build a apartment building in my local town in Jersey, I'd go to my local bank and that bank would fund me. Is that bank there for me now, or do I have to go somewhere else?
I think there's going to be, the answer will be both. You will have the local banks, but you're going to have to start going somewhere else. Private credit is, it's getting its heyday right now. Everyone's like, oh, private credit's filling the bank gap. But again, I think that's a missed story. Private credit's been here for a long, long time. Like, this has been my career, it's been in private credit. It's playing out into the gap, and I think there's a long way to go in private credit.
Right.
I think that'll continue to play out. So it wouldn't be anomalous to say in the future, you may get your development loan from someone else. But I don't think the banks are going away. They're a vital part of the economy. We need them.
Okay, but the banks have the Fed down their neck, your throat, coming off of 2007-8. What are the this is where, Brian, your wheelhouse. What is the character in shadows within private credit that Paul Sweeney and I can't see?
That private credit is accretive to the market, right? So
what do you mean by that? John Tucker, would you translate that for us?
Wait, what's an SASB in mortgage-backed securities?
That's a large single asset, single borrower securitization.
And they're hurting?
Those are actually back. They're doing quite well. You saw the Rock Center.
What is this, investment hour?
I know.
I read that today.
I was doing the story this morning.
Yeah, we read that.
Richard, go away. Lisa Mateo would never ask a question like that. Private credit.
Yeah.
Where are they? Come on, Paul, help me here. Private credit, there's got to be a new character of shadows, right?
But at the point, I think, is around private credit is what gap is that filling in the market, right? And if you think about the market used to be very simple. You used to have banks, life insurance companies, CMBS, and the agencies. There used to be 4 quadrants. They wouldn't overlap, and that is changing up pretty dramatically. It's changing up because you're seeing private equity-backed insurance companies changing that whole landscape. Banks are broken down into the massive people, the regionals, and the small, and they're all having different stories they're playing out. What private credit is doing is the same thing private equity did in the equity markets 30 years ago. They came in, and they're filling gaps, and they're able to offer investors, different access to the credit markets.
If a piece of commercial office real estate on 3rd Avenue traded hands tomorrow at 40 cents on the dollar, would you guys finance that?
Probably not.
Probably not.
And the reason is we're trying to look at long-term, real estate is long-term asset class. And so what our investment thesis is, where do we see the world in 10, 15 years? And so we're playing much more into global living. We're playing much more into logistics that feel like have that longer-term trend, the tailwinds at its back. And we also have enough office right now, so we don't want to overweight. We've been underweighting office since 2011, so maybe the wrong person.
South Jersey, one of these huge facilities where they do cargo and boxes coming in and out, would you finance that?
Yeah.
See, I would finance that.
Yeah.
So, it's just, where is the price on 3rd Avenue where you would finance that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a price. I think it's a growth story. I think the question is, back to fundamentals. So when outside of office, fundamentals are strong.
Right.
Tenants are leasing, rents are going up, you're seeing good fundamentals. Until you have confidence in the fundamentals of that office building. Gotcha. Now, trophy office is thriving.
Okay, One Vanderbilt. Balloon's down there.
This is a trophy. John, we're in a trophy office.
We're in a trophy office.
We're in a trophy.
Oh, yeah, feels like it.
But seriously, what's your x-axis on this? How long a workout do we have in Class B, Class C non-trophy properties?
It's a long time.
Come on,
it's a 10-year plus.
You're with PGIM. I wouldn't get that answer from Greg
I think that 10-year plus
is a 10-year plus.
I think it's a generation thing. Yeah. I don't know when we're going to get the workforce back to where it was. I think it's a generational thing.
But I think office was limping going into COVID. I think that's what was missing. Is it wasn't a COVID-specific issue.
Brilliant.
It was the capital was never fully appreciated. These office buildings are expensive to run.
Yep.
And so that's where other asset classes provide less volatility for investors.
Does Tom Parcelli really take a Hinckley picnic boat down the Hudson River
sure he
to
does.
work?
I have no comment.
That's how he says it.
I heard this rumor. It's amazing.
He's a player.
He's a player. He's like, I'll work at PGIM, but you got to get me there in style.
Exactly.
Brian, thank you. Don't be a stranger. Brian McDonald here, civil engineering, Northwestern University. That's a real degree.
That is, I know.
Robert Gordon's been on fire.
And then he doubles up and gets the MBA at Northwestern, which is a top business school.
It's a twisted business school.
It is good.
It's like, Cubs or White Sox. They go Cubs.
Yep.
They do. Brian, thank you so much. How about apolitical songs today. I mean, it's just Tom Petty at Fenway Park. Good morning.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, John Tucker in for Lisa Mateo. She's on assignment. Michael Barr with us as well. We're going to get right to it. This is the important conversation for global Wall Street today. Joining us, Anurag, Rana, and Mandeep Singh. We'll do that here in moments. Busy day. Earnings out. Futures -9. VIX over 20 is, well, a political maelstrom, to say the least. Bloomberg Surveillance. We're brought to you by CohnReznick. Advisory Assurance Tax. Discover optimization strategies that are helping CFOs make their finance functions more competitive and more resilient. Talk to CohnReznick's advisors. We thank CohnReznick for lifelong Bloomberg surveillance support. They've been a real backbone here. As well. Any comment on earnings so far, Paul?
I think earnings have generally been pretty good. I think the expectations this quarter were a little bit less than what we saw in the earlier half of the year, but generally pretty solid here, I think.
And again, I'm going to steal everything I can from Julian Emanuel. He's become iconic at Evercore ISI with his daily summary here of earnings season. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, he's no Lisa Mateo, John Tucker.
All right, since you brought it up, firms accounting for nearly 42% of the S&P 500's market cap reporting this week, including 5 of the 7 tech mega caps. Right now, pre-market Dow futures down 149. S&P futures down 9. The NASDAQ futures down close to 7. Dow component McDonald's reporting sales falling short of expectations. Weak spot international markets like the Mideast. The U.S. was actually a bright spot with growth of 0.3%. And Ford Motor shares will finish there slumping after cautioning that full-year earnings will be at the low end of its forecast. 2-year yields unchanged, 4.14. The 10-year yield up a basis point. That is at 4.30. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash, Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. In Chicago, Anurag Rana joins us this morning. And here in our studios, Mandeep Singh. This is the way it has to be, folks. They're not allowed to be in the same building. They're that important for what we do. Paul Sweeney, what do Anurag Rana and Mandeep Singh do for us?
They run our technology research. It is a global business, Tom. We have research analysts around the world, Europe, Asia, North America, to really get a real handle on the entire technology stack. Right. Anurag, let's start with you here. We got earnings coming up this week. Let's start with Apple. I'm not sure what the story is here. I'll tell you what I'm concerned about is China. Can you give us a sense of kind of Apple and China and what you think we might hear from Apple this quarter as it relates to China?
Paul, I think you nailed it. We are concerned about China as well. We've been hearing about a slowdown in spending in China on the luxury goods market, whether it's LVMH or Swatch. And we heard from some of the suppliers as well that the fourth quarter or the December quarter numbers may be a little light. So when they give guidance for next quarter, Apple, when they report on Thursday, I think that could be a concern. And we are on the same page as you that China is an issue.
Anurag, back it up then one day. On Microsoft, I guess it's AI angst. What is the character of Anurag Rana's AI angst?
So when you look at Microsoft for over the next 12 months, we are going to see massive capex going into the market, along with a little bit of margin degradation. So this is not going to be financially a massive year for Microsoft when it comes to earnings growth. But at the same time, that's the only company where we can see actual benefits of AI translating into revenue. And I think that's most important for them, is to prove to the market that their AI revenue is picking up better than anybody else out there, and their positioning is stronger. And I think that's most important for Microsoft.
Tom, our good friend Mandeep Singh here in studio, he's sporting a cast on his left hand. Some tennis injury. Goes back to my theory, no one ever got hurt sitting on a bar stool. So Mandeep, I don't know what's going on with you in your tennis game. We got the digital advertising players, the Googles, the Facebooks of the world. How's that business these days?
I mean, given, we are coming off peak interest rates and, with lower interest rates, you typically see digital ads tend to do well. So I would say, both Meta and Google should see a kind of a tick up when it comes to digital ad spending. The thing to keep in mind is where the expectations are. So in the case of Meta, expectations are already for 20% growth. So it's hard to see them coming up with a big beat and raise. They could. But in the case of Alphabet, the expectation is for 13% growth. And that includes your cloud business, which is growing at 30%. So I would argue there is a more likelihood of Alphabet beating their numbers than Meta.
Okay, nobody cares. Anurag Rana, I'm going to go to you, Mandeep, now. But Anurag, I want you to jump in here. Are you kidding me? My search is cluttered. I've got all this AI garbage up top. I can't get to search like I used to. What are we going to look like, Mandeep Singh, in 12 months?
Well, so ChatGPT has clearly changed the user interface for how people search. And for informational queries, a ChatGPT interface is far better than a Google search. But for search...
Says who?
Just
it's too much to read. I just want to get to a Google search.
But Google search will show you 10 links, and then you have to figure out which is the best link you want to.
Okay, but last night I'm searching for gherkins for martinis. I want the little cute,
ones, sure.
The little cute pickles.
Yep, absolutely.
I get 4 miles of AI Chat GPT garbage rather than search Google gherkins martini.
You're absolutely right. So for transactional queries, for navigational queries, there is no substitute from ChatGPT. It's only for informational queries. That's where ChatGPT is making
informational queries. Like maybe
how
you make the best.
Okay. We go to Anurag Rana in Chicago. Anurag, does this mean Bing to the rescue? Is this finally where Bing gets it going?
No, I don't think so. I think what's going to happen is for transactional, as Mandeep mentioned, you're going to have enterprise companies coming up with Copilot/AI agents that can help you find those things better. So I think this is where a lot of the companies will be spending money. Whether it is e-commerce, whether it is any other area, you will see AI helping you better get the right product for you in your hand. And I think that's the big differentiator.
Tom, I think the reason Mandeep and Anurag sound so smart is because they cover technology and it just grows every single year. I could sound smart talking about technology. So Anurag, talk to us about, I know we spend a lot of money buying you and Mandeep this IDC data about where all the tech spending is going, and I paid for that for many years. Where is tech spending going over the next several years? Is this a slowing growth market, or is tech spending going to go crazy with AI?
When you look at tech spending right now, Paul and Tom, we are seeing a bit of a slowdown in non-AI tech spending. So the big bucket is still the same what it was the last few years, but companies are just allocating money from one bucket to the other. What we are hoping is by next year, hoping that, the Middle East crisis calms down a little bit, the election is over. Companies are going to do net new addition to that spending, which is going to help both the AI part of it and the non-AI part of it.
Bloomberg surveillance for you across the nation in your commute. Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. Mandeep Singh has both in his car. and Sirius XM, channel 121, good morning as well. The Corridor, Washington, New York, Boston, 92.9 FM, good morning as well. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. It's a new digital effort here. Thrilled at the growth of YouTube for Bloomberg surveillance. Mandeep Singh, I got to get back to foundationals here. I actually watched, sort of curious about the colors, the M4 launch yesterday. And you know where I am. I'm chip-centric. I'm with Mandeep on this, folks. Forget about, pink or orange. What do I need in an iMac? 3-nanometer semiconductors. Explain to our audience the importance of 3-nanometer on our path to 2 nanometers.
Yeah, look, the reason why we are talking about AI is because all these computations are growing exponentially. Look at how much we have come in terms of NVIDIA GPU architecture. So the same architecture has to be brought on the device side when it comes to the smartphones and the PCs you use. And that's what Apple has to do in terms of using the 3-nanometer manufacturing capacity to make this chip so powerful that it can run a full-fledged AI model on the chip.
So then, Anurag, how does Mandeep's world of 3 nanometers fold over to what Nadella has to do at the conference call on Microsoft on Thursday?
When you look at Microsoft, what they are trying to push is all their enterprise applications, whether it's Dynamics or Office, they need those to be much smarter to make it a point that people upgrade to the next version of it. So that's where you get the ARPU. When you look at a company like Microsoft, the number of people who are using Excel are pretty much constant. They really need people to go upstream in order to make more money. And that's where they need to prove that the co-pilots actually have that productivity that comes in it, which is going to force people to upgrade.
The cloud. Give us a sense, Anurag, I'm thinking about Amazon, Google, some of the big players here in the Microsofts of the world. Give us a sense of the lay of the land here on the cloud. Who's kind of on the margin doing a better job and who might be on the margin kind of slipping a little bit?
See, this is the way we think about cloud. The entire market is growing at such a rapid rate that all 3 big companies are going to make money. In fact, Oracle's going to make money as well. But when you look at it at this point of time, because of Microsoft's relationship with OpenAI, they are doing slightly better than the other 2. But I have no doubts that both Amazon and Google will make a lot of money over the next few years because it is much easier to run some of these AI workloads in the cloud infrastructure rather than doing it in-house. If you're a large bank like JP Morgan, you may decide to do it in-house because you have the capital to do it, but not everybody else can go out buy GPUs and AI servers and try to do this in-house. There's a massive shortage of labor out there as well.
Mandeep, I want to ask you about an old-time, long-in-the-tooth tech company, Intel. I know you're not the chip guy, but you hired our chip guy. Yeah. What's going on with Intel?
It's your fault.
Exactly.
It's your fault.
Can we ever get our good friends at Intel back on the cutting edge again?
Well, Tom mentioned about 3-nanometer. Intel has still not perfected 7 nanometers. So for them to get to 3 nanometer, they still need that time to build their capabilities. And that's where I think Intel has struggled for the last 5 years. It's hard to see how they can get directly to 3 nanometer, given where TSMC is, but that's where the gap is.
3 nanometer, John.
Yeah, it is 10 to the minus 9. Yeah. Whoa. Anurag, Rana, last question to you here. When you do some of the parts of technology, how far out the x-axis can you go? If you sum of the parts, I don't want you to do buy, hold, sell, but if you sum of the parts, some of these companies reporting this week, is it confidence out 3 years, 5 years? Is it Anurag, Rana confidence out to 10 years?
I really think they need to basically mention that the demand is so strong that they really don't see a way that they're going to reduce their capex anytime soon. Any talk of reduction as capex is going to be taken with a lot of negativity right now, because the way these guys are spending, they're going to spend, let's say, close to $100 billion extra over the next 2.5 years or so. If they say we're going to slow that down, that's bad sign. But otherwise, what they're basically saying is that the total addressable market is growing at such a rapid rate that they are out there to spend the money and then collect the dollars after that.
I shaved the beard today.
Thank you.
I mean, these
Thank
guys
you.
are scoping beards here.
No,
Mandeep, is that like a BI thing?
Mandeep's fine. He's
I don't
always
have
had
a
it.
choice.
Anurag is
He looks
another
like,
matter whatsoever.
the Redux of Clooney out in Chicago.
Exactly, which is a burgeoning tech hub. I'm not sure if you knew about it. That's why we have Anurag
Chicago's
in Chicago.
a burgeoning tech hub.
Exactly.
Tell that to Boeing.
Anurag,
Rana, thank you so much. Greatly. This is a pleasure. I can't tell you, folks, the gift we have in what Sweeney invented at Bloomberg Intelligence. Mandeep Singh, Anurag Rana, to tell me how much money I lost by not being in big tech stocks today. Triple leverage, all cash. That's good.
Sleep well at night.
We sleep well as we lose every day to inflation. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg News with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Google parent Alphabet, the first of the Mag 7 big tech companies to report. That'll come after the close of regular trading. 4 other Mag 7 stocks will follow this week. This morning, you have shares of McDonald's. They are falling. They fell short of expectations in the third quarter because of weakness in the international markets. Ford Motor shares, they're slumping. They caution that full-year earnings are going to be at the low end of its forecast. Boeing also dropping after completing that $21 billion share sale, one of the largest ever by a public company. And then earnings from Pfizer, those shares rising, the drug maker boosting revenue and earnings forecast. And crypto companies also getting a lift today as Bitcoin rises past $71,000 per token for the first time since June. Data today, among the data today, we're going to get the job opening labor turnover survey. JOLTS, I think that's at 10 o'clock. Right now, Dow futures 127 points lower. S&P futures down 7. The NASDAQ futures down 4. Oh, here's one for you. Starbucks telling its corporate staff to get back in the office at least 3 days.
3 days? I saw that.
Or they're going to get fired. I don't know if is the CEO still working remotely?
He's commuting from L.A.
No, well, yeah, just outside of L.A., Newport Beach, I think.
Yeah. No, listen to you. The sophisticated.
I've never been there, but I hear it's nice.
The Gulf Stream into Newport Beach in Orange is much better than into LAX.
Yeah, that's how you.
There's just too much.
That's where the smart money goes.
Oh,
I mean, with the G.
Relating to the real people out there,
we took
our
the
own
G3
Tom
into
Keene.
LAX once, and it was
it's no fun.
Lucas, I think, has it this week.
He does. He might. Lucas Shaw. He's a player.
Joining us right now with the worst job at Bloomberg is Michael Shepard. He is in Washington, and he and Margaret Collins have to herd cats here till November 5. Mike, let me just get the broader view here. Is you and Peggy Collins set up for this election? Is a general statement, is everybody all hands on deck into the next weekend?
Well, Tom, first I got to say it is, I think, the best job at Bloomberg. What more would you want?
You know
where
why
else would you want to be
John,
than?
Yeah,
right here.
Mike, he's got the best food court in Bloomberg.
He does.
They have
Well,
protein.
we do.
They do.
I'll stack our pantry up against any other
best.
pantry around the world. But yeah, Peggy and I have been bracing for this election for weeks, if not months, and really, if not for the past 4 years, really, because as soon as Joe Biden took the oath of office back in 2021, Donald Trump was already laying his plans for a comeback, and we're seeing that now come to a head. He gave his closing argument on Sunday night, Madison Square Garden, which everybody watched so closely, and Harris is going to do the same thing tonight.
And there's reports, and folks, I'm just talking from the zeitgeist here. There's reports that the Trump team is preparing for a second administration. Is the Harris team, Mike Shepard, preparing for a Harris presidency? Are they there yet?
You know, they're trying to lay the groundwork as best they can, but remember the challenge that they face. They've really only had a few months as a full-fledged presidential operation and campaign. So it is a bit of a scramble for them, and they have to figure out who might stay on and in what roles, and who they might want to bring in from the outside, including from the business world, too.
I mean, on YouTube live chat, the ladies dig the beard, gotta have it. We're having, is there any guest today without a beard?
I don't know. It's kind of what the young folks are doing. Hey, Mike, how are you and your colleagues at the Washington, D.C. Bureau of Bloomberg News, how are you guys figuring out when this thing, we'll know one way or the other who's winning? Is this going to be a day, 2 days, a week? How are you guys thinking about this?
We're bracing for the long haul, Paul, and that's a great question because so many people, especially on Wall Street, are wondering when will the uncertainty about the election outcome end? And we're not really going to know until sometime toward the end of next week, based on our best estimates and guesses. The election is so closely contested, and we are expecting, some challenges from the Trump side or the Harris side, even in some of those swing states. So buckle up, make sure you bring plenty of snacks and that you're comfortable because we're going to be in this for the long haul. And remember, Tom, in 2020, it took until Saturday after the election before we had an outcome.
Okay, Mike Shepard, I'm on a Heidi Moore shout out. Heidi Moore, folks, follow her out on Twitter. Really is always controversial, always interesting, always informative. And she crushed the other day, Mike Shepard, criticizing all the punditry that you have to deal with 24/7 because nobody's looking at the margin of error. Those on YouTube, folks, Ari's putting up this killer map of the swing states, Harris, Trump, blue. I should wear chinos, get in front of my chart, wear chinos and, tell everybody here what's going on. Baloney. Mike Shepard, where did margin of error go? Heidi Moore wants to know.
Look, margin of error is baked into all of these polls, but people are emphasizing what the difference is. The margin of error does get lost a little bit in the fine print. And the truth is, it is very hard for us to discern from the surveys that we've been taking for months now where voters stand. And if you look at early voting results, we've already had, according to NBC News, 44 million people cast ballots already. And from the data that we see on those early votes, it's hard to tell. Where is it falling? Does it advantage one party or another? We simply can't tell based on the parties and affiliations of people who've already either submitted mail-in ballots or gone to early polling places. This is a really tough one to call based on the data available and based on the surveys. Although one thing I'll say, in our Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll, this was one number that stood out. Of nearly 5,000 voters in our last survey that published on Wednesday, guess how many voters declared themselves as undecided out of nearly 5,000? It was 93. And that's pretty astonishing. And that kind of gives you an idea of the small space that the two candidates are really fighting over.
They were all at a bar in New Jersey with John Tucker where they were very undecided.
Very undecided. Mike, how about down ballot here? What do we know so far about how some of that is shaking out or could shake out?
Well, Paul, another great question because it's not just the presidency that's at stake. It's control of Congress, and the Senate is especially crucial this year because whoever wins the presidency will have to contend with a Senate that could very well be opposite them, and we are likely to have divided government again, and they'll have veto power in essence over cabinet nominees and judicial nominees.
Okay, so let's just go there. I got 1 minute left, Mike Shepard. Let's go to Ohio. Sherrod Brown is fighting for his life, I believe, for the Senate, the Democrat versus a spirited Republican. Do either of those candidates want their presidential candidates to show up to campaign for them in Ohio?
Well, yeah, that's a good question, Tom. Because
it's my only one of the days. Keep going.
Well, because for a lot of especially John Tester, also out in Montana, they don't necessarily want to be associated with the top of the ticket, and they really do want to speak to more local issues. And that's something that Sherrod Brown, for instance, in Ohio has tried to do well, listening to the union base out there. Bernie Moreno, his rival on the Republican side, is also trying to make a different kind of appeal to voters there, too. So it is going to be very tough to determine which has the edge. Right now, though, the electoral map favors Republicans when it comes to the Senate.
Mike Shepard, thank you so much. Leading our coverage here on our politics in Washington, always with Margaret Collins, the Washington News Bureau. Their food court, you go in.
Yeah, sure.
It's there because, they have dignitaries show up, like real people.
Yeah, players coming in from D.C. and
they have like protein and the whole thing, and you can I'm up at Ben's Chili Bowl, but
right
up on U Street, but the fact is it's pretty deluxe to say the least. They go nonstop.
This is going to be interesting. When you think about it, they will be around the clock, starting Tuesday morning, if not before, and then just going. Is it going to be Wednesday? Is it going to be Thursday? Will we know by Friday? Or is it going to be a weekend type thing? I don't know. It didn't used to be that way, so I'm not sure what's changed other than it's so evenly divided.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to see. Fading away here, -10 here. Of course, Google earnings are coming up after the close. Very, very important in getting us up to a full tech earnings season. Stay with Bloomberg. Really, really wonderful coverage. I can't say enough about the MLive coverage. For those of you with a terminal, just definitive line-by-line coverage, like read the press release and actually try to understand where free cash flow conversion is, or whatever the ratio of the moment is. That's what we do at Bloomberg. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast, growing each and every day.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Traders waiting for third quarter earnings season to move into high gear with the first of the Mag 7 big tech giants, Google parent Alphabet. They're going to report after the close of regular trading. Ahead of that, we have the major averages. They are lower to little change. Dow futures down 147. The S&P E-mini futures down 9 points. NASDAQ futures down 3. JetBlue shares slipping after worse than expected sales forecasts. This suggests that a recovery is going to take some time there. Fourth quarter revenue will be down as much as 7% from a year ago. McDonald's, they were slipping about 3%. Sales falling short of the street's expectations in the third quarter. That follows weakness mostly in the international markets. And Pfizer rising, the drug maker boosting its revenue and adjusted earnings per share forecast for the full year. Let me do Crocs shares. They plunged in pre-market trading. Crocs, those shoes, the brightly colored plastic clogs, tempering growth expectations, warning of sales declines for its casual hey dude. Also, more and more schools we're hearing are like telling kids they can't wear Crocs to school.
And why is that? They throw them around, or
I think it's like, you get your toes crushed at gym or whatever. I don't know.
Do you have a pair, John?
The kids have like pairs. They haven't worn them in a while, but
Yeah.
no, I don't.
Vetville has them.
I could not see myself wearing them.
There's dog Crocs.
John Tucker.
No, there's dog Crocs.
Are there?
They're great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're great. They work every time. Economic data, we need to really emphasize here. Friday, jobs report.
Yes.
Sort of with all the news flow, the election and all. Friday, jobs report. Our leadership there starts with Commonwealth, our economic indicators. Always brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors who are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies. Grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. Okay, one day's V. Bodie's in class, BU, Boston University, corporate god, honored that, he would pay attendance to me as well. And he goes, who let the music major in? How in God's name did you get from a wind ensemble over to Zvi Bodie in finance over to being a windbag pundit for Wall Street? What was the BU path like to go from music to finance?
Well, the starting point was being what we call a brass hole, if I can say that.
You can say that on the radio.
Yeah. I walked across the street and I had an interview and we hit it off. And I still own that textbook to this day. It was green when I was in school.
Yes.
I don't know what color it is now.
Is anything in that textbook make sense here with Mag 7 the skewedness of S&P 500? Is finance of Zvi Bodie make sense?
This is extremely unusual. No. And I'll be honest, I hate the Mag 7 market and this high concentration risk. And the issue is, and this speaks to ourselves and our portfolios, we own a lot of tech. Everybody does, especially in these cap-weighted indices. So I think the challenge is to force ourselves to take profits from some of those darlings and reallocate into the laggards.
I mean, Paul, I didn't do the Sweeney introduction I should have done. Technology with his chief market strategist, Wealth Consulting Group. He's on speaking terms with Brian Levitt.
No kidding, that's big.
We text.
So, Tally, if I'm a little fatigued or I want to look for some diversification outside of the Mag 7, which we're going to have 5 of those companies reporting this week, where do you go?
So I like the domestic value cyclicals. I've been harping on the industrials recently, and I like some of the activity that we've been seeing there. But I also like the global cyclicals, like materials, which I think could similarly benefit from some of the activity we're seeing from global policymakers.
So am I talking, give us a sector or a name or two, just to give us our listeners and viewers kind of a sense of what you're thinking about.
So in the industrial sector, and one of my friendly institutional investors offered the name Parker Hannifin.
Oh, so we're going that
enough
deep.
people are talking about some of these fantastic U.S. machinery stocks.
Yep.
So look that one up. My own CIO, the great Jim Warden, has been flashing 3M.
Yeah.
But I would also point to financials.
Okay.
And I'm looking at the easing in bank lending standards alongside a bottoming in C&I loan growth, and I think that bodes well for the outlook there as well.
We're kind of getting into the, right smack in the middle of this earnings season here. What have you seen from corporate earnings? What do you expect to see? What do you think this market needs to see from this earnings cycle?
So I think that analysts are too pessimistic here. They have lowered their expectations heading into the third quarter too much. So the bar is low. And this is a big week, as you know, for 5 of the Mag 7, basically NVIDIA's biggest customers. But I think just going by the recent pattern, past 4 quarters, I think the analysts as a group, they're expecting something like mid-single-digit growth year over year. But they have undershot by about the same pace. So just by the behavior alone, I think you could easily get 8% year-over-year earnings growth. You add to that the upward trajectory in the guidance ratio, I think we could get some really good earnings here.
Okay, so McDonald's out with a single headline, folks. They put out like 40 headlines, let's say. And some of them are geeky nerd. Nobody ever looks at them, talks about them. But there is their free cash flow conversion, which is a measurement of the cash coming in as compared to earnings before depreciation, EBITDA, and all that. Okay, The huge distinction here, Tally, is the profit being made across all of the S&P 500. That's the key distinction right now, isn't it?
I think that's right. And so all we need is for the Mag 7 to keep generating these robust earnings growth rates around 9% over the next 4 quarters. Just tread water. That's not news. The real delta, the change, the new information is for the 493 to go from 0 expected in the third quarter to 16%.
You've got a bar chart of that, and that's maybe my bar chart of the quarter, Paul.
Yes.
Is everybody, 483 stocks, including 3M, they're not making any money, and that's just wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, how about valuation here, Tally? I mean, how concerned are you about valuation? I guess some folks say pull out some of those Mag 7 names. The market's not that overly priced. Can you even do that, do you think?
Well, I think you can. And so I would admit, at the index level, especially these cap-weighted indices, valuations are looking lofty. So you don't have to go very far, just beyond the Mag 7, those 493 that I talk about here, to find some better relative valuations. And that's the catch-up rotation phase of the market. That
Are Apple and Microsoft under-owned? I mean, there's a whole percolation out there that selected portfolios own too much of them, but a lot of other people don't own enough. As a general rule, are this week's earnings, including Google today, are they under-owned?
Well, I think that's quantifiable, but I would argue that those non-Mag 7 are more deeply under-owned. And that's just a conceptual statement, but I'm going by the relative attractive valuations and the performance that just hasn't been there until recently.
Headlines across the Bloomberg, folks. It's like Twitter on steroids in finance. Headlines here moments ago on a conference call of McDonald's. McDonald's says the Escherichia coli outbreak, it appears to be contained. McDonald's confident it can return quarter pounders to the menu.
Yeah, I'm going to go get a number 2 with a Coke today, right around the corner on 3rd Avenue, just to show my support.
Slick ordering service.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It's all tech. That's how the kids do it now. What's the risk in the marketplace that maybe Tom and I aren't paying attention to?
Well, I don't know about the one that we're not paying attention to. I think the front and center risk is the election. Everybody knows about that. But, I mean, look, if the past few election cycles are any guide, I think we're facing a rising risk of some volatility, which should calm once we get past November.
But don't we go
5th.
through this every 4 years? I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I grew up in a house where they were apoplectic about this, and I just don't see it. I just don't get it.
I tend to agree. I think the politicians generally get too much credit when things go right and too much blame when they don't go so well. So the way I looked at it, I parsed it out, whether it was Trump or Biden. On the Trump score, from inauguration to inauguration, he reigned over some 70% return on stocks. Similarly, from election day to election day, Biden enjoyed 70% plus returns. Either way, it makes you, as an investor, really question how much do our political leaders really change the longer-term market and economic outlook. I don't think they really do.
What's a sector that screens well for you guys these days?
So I had been opining on financials. I already mentioned that one. I apologize for that. Industrials is another.
How about energy? I mean, we've seen energy pop all around the place. Now we got WTI crude oil now below 70. I guess some of that geopolitical risk coming out. Is it just too volatile for an equity investor to take a position?
So I admit I tried it in the summer of last year. Well, it was really October, so early fall. It was a trade on the outbreak of the war in the Middle East, and it fizzled. It didn't last, and it's been kind of the same thing.
Tally, thank you. Tally Leger with us, with Wealth Consultant Group. Greatly appreciate it this morning here on the courage to be in the market. Catherine Kapinski coming up later on here on trend analysis as well. We moved there from Zvi Bodhi and BU over to MIT. She almost won the Nobel Prize with Simon Johnson. She was shortlisted there.
Solid.
As well. Futures -10. The VIX expands out over 2020. 0.14. I'm watching the real yield, the 10-year real yield, 2.00%. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. Vice President Kamala Harris will make her closing argument tonight from Washington's historic National Mall. Harris held a campaign rally in Ann Arbor, Michigan last night.
Are we ready to vote? Are we ready to win? Yes. And we will win. And we will win.
Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump was in the battleground state of Georgia. He responded to new criticism from former First Lady Michelle Obama in recent days.
You know what's nasty to me? Michelle Obama. She was
He will hold an event today talking to reporters at his Mar-a-Lago home. With 7 days to go before Election Day, incendiary devices were set off Monday at 2 ballot drop boxes, one in Portland, Oregon, and another in nearby Vancouver, Washington. It destroyed ballots in what one official called a direct attack on democracy. Clark County, Washington Auditor Greg Kimsey.
We are still in the process of coming in with a closer number, but certainly was hundreds.
Kimsey says that they're urging voters to deposit ballots during the day and changing pickup schedules to keep them from sitting in drop boxes overnight. Authorities in Portland say that enough material from the incendiary devices was recovered to show that the 2 fires were connected. The Los Angeles Dodgers take Game 3 of the World Series against the New York Yankees in a 4-2 win. The Dodgers are on the verge of sweeping the series. Dodgers manager Dave Roberts says his team is very hungry for a championship.
We have got to stay focused, stay urgent. I think offensively, to be quite honest, we left a lot of runs out there.
Game 4 is tonight in the Bronx. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Good morning, worldwide. It's now time for Bronx talk here on Surveillance. What do they need to do? Michael Barr, what do the Yankees need to do? First pitch.
First pitch, we got to come on, Aaron, come on. Here comes the judge. He's been in
Paul,
a slump.
You're the real Yankees fan here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we need our leader to lead. He's been underperforming, but we need the pitchers to pitch better, and we need to field better. I mean, a lot of tough plays by Mr. Soto out in the field, and maybe run the bases a little better.
The Rodon I saw was not the Rodon I saw with the San Francisco Giants. Fact.
Yep.
I mean, that was the biggest error I saw in pitching. To me, Michael Barr, are they hitting singles or doubles? I don't think so. Everybody wants to be a hero for the Yankees. That's what I see, except Verdugo.
Yeah. Forget the long ball. Just get the singles and doubles.
Okay, we'll have to see. What do you think, Rich? Is this the year they clean house? Done. There we are. There's the analysis. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. After Monday's gains on Wall Street, futures lowered a little change right now. Some of the early earnings results this morning disappointing. You have PayPal Holdings dropping after revenue forecast miss. McDonald's, you mentioned that after sales fell short of expectations. Pfizer shares, however, they're rising. The drug maker boosting revenue and their earnings forecast. And data-heavy week today. We're going to get the JOLTS survey. Friday's employment report, the last the Federal Reserve is going to see before the policy meeting next week. That'll probably be muddled by the Boeing strike as well as hurricanes. Dow futures down 191. S&P futures down 11. NASDAQ futures down 6. Bitcoin tokens above 71,000 per token. Real quick from the New York Times, this is actually a small business. In the United States, there are about 3,000 of them. Professional haunts or locations set up to scare guests, according to the Haunted Attraction Association. They point out Blood Manor in New York. These aren't cheap to run. They actually have to lease the space year-round because they can't find other tenants who want to deal with indoor graveyards or demonic morgues. So,
do people trick-or-treat at the Tucker house?
No, the return on your investment is not worth it because we're at the top of the hill, and you pass out.
You got a bag
of
Butterfingers from 25 years ago.
I left out
the mold on.
So I don't even bother staying because I go to bed early. Yeah. I leave the bowl out, and just in case somebody does show out, it's gone. But it's just like I had the camera this last year. Yeah, it was the deer. Or a kid dressed up as a deer.
Yeah, it could be either. That's what are you going as? I'm going as Lyme disease. John Tucker, thank you so much. Lauren Saidel-Baker joins us right now. What is it? What is this? BU Day?
Could be. Everywhere. They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. Yep. She's joining us right now with a view here from ITR Economics. Lauren, I think the great thing with ITR Economics is looking at businesses and looking at, you're not looking at Apple or you're not looking at Minnesota Manufacturers and Mining. What's the mood of business that you see out there at ITR Economics?
The general mood I would characterize as wait and see. I feel like so many businesses are just holding back on that investment. They're waiting out the election. They're waiting out either this next round of Federal Reserve cuts or just a little bit more information on interest rate policy going forward. So I feel like there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines, a lot of that belt tightening waiting to come back. I think that's going to really boost 2025. But we're in this kind of, again, muddled, just holding back environment in 2024.
Single sentence here. This is just great. We do not find a consistent and significant impact of presidential elections on major indicators. Thank you, Lauren, for that.
So, Lauren, how do you think about inflation here? If you were to sit down with the Fed, would you say, hey, we've got inflation kind of under control here?
For the moment, inflation is very much under control. This disinflationary environment is persisting. Even wage inflation, which had been so sticky, our labor market's still relatively tight, but that's finally cooling off a bit. I do see inflation coming back, though, by late 2025. So I think the Fed, their job is not totally done. They can't just wash their hands and be finished with it forever. But in this intermediate lull, we are in a pretty good position. Now, the consumer doesn't feel that. They feel the cumulative impact of all of this inflation. So we'll still see those headlines. Prices are still rising, but at a much more moderate pace. I think businesses are really understanding that.
So is there risk, though, however, that inflation could come back next year? I mean, there are some concerns out there that says that the Fed goes a little bit too aggressive here, that inflation is just, it could straight under the I guess, the cover here and could come back.
I fully expect that it will. So I don't expect us to reignite inflation to that 9% CPI peak that we saw back in 2022, but I do expect something moderately higher. I don't really feel this low single-digit inflation rate is sustainable, partially because of some of those fundamental factors. We can look at velocity of money. We can look at that rebound in the money supply. Gross treasury issuance, that's actually surging right now. So a lot of liquidity will be coming for us in 2025. But beyond that, with our outlook is very much for the macro sector to kind of resurge, right? Accelerating growth to come back. All of that demand pull on pricing, especially on wages with this tight labor market, probably tightening back down. The fundamental factors are in place for higher, not lower inflation.
Lauren, you were weaned by Carl Case and company at Wellesley College, which is a great respect for granular economics. ITR is coming out of New Hampshire, where you're buttressed up with urban technology, Boston, and frankly, a lot of hardship from Vermont on over to New Hampshire. You're at a tipping point geographically within New England. How does our GDP react 1 year or 4 years from now from this crushing polarization in America?
I think GDP is big enough. We can really move through that political cycle. I agree. We in New Hampshire feel this. We're not historically a purple state, and increasingly we are becoming so. But GDP, as you started the segment by saying it really doesn't respond to one person, even if that one person is sitting in the Oval Office. So we have looked back historically at the timing of election years. Does that impact GDP? The president who controls the House and Senate. We just don't find a consistent and a significant correlation going forward. So the economy doesn't have a favorite political party. Even our consumers, our sentiment. We feel one way, but we act in completely different ways. So I don't see that this election or even the increasing polarization, it's really affecting our spending habits or, say, our manufacturing sector, right? Industrial production. The economy is just too big for that. So there will be real social impacts. But from an economic perspective, no, we just don't see a winner.
How do you view the U.S. consumer right here? I mean, he or she has a job if they want. Wages are going higher. Yes, inflation is still out there. How do you feel about the U.S. consumer here?
The U.S. consumer is actually quite healthy. We would not know it if we just read sentiment surveys and looked at the headlines. But as you said, more people have more jobs, more people making more money. Our wages are still outpacing inflation. So our purchasing power has never been better. And with the consumer accounting for about 2/3 of GDP, that's a very stable base. Now, there are some pockets of concern. So we do see increasing credit card debt, right? Some increase in kind of household debt metrics. But these are not coming back to, I say, 2006 levels, not by a long shot. These are still relatively stable from that broad historical position.
One final question, Lauren. We just had on Simon Johnson, Nobel laureate, MIT. It was a real great honor to speak to Professor Johnson. And he talked about the religion of economic growth, which I'm going to say was weaned by Robert Solow in 1956, 1957. You did economics, religion, double major at Wellesley, which is extraordinary. How do you look at the religion of economic growth, the hope, the prayer, the belief that with good practices we can prosper?
We always say hope is not a business strategy. So I think the religion of economics, I'm clearly a firm believer in free market economics, right? In the fact that if you can know what's coming next, you can certainly outperform the cycle, whether it's a good cycle, a bad cycle, right? Even in a recession, businesses who know that's coming, who can plan appropriately, they absolutely will outperform. But as for that double major, Wellesley College is a very special place that I was able to do that. But I think I came out of there uniquely qualified to be a door-to-door Bible salesman and not too much else.
I could see that.
Yeah, I could see that.
You know, that would add to GDP.
Up in New Hampshire.
As well. Oh, I'd work in New Hampshire, but she could be out there. The question's which Bible. Lauren, thank you. Lauren Saidel-Baker with us with the ITR Economics New Hampshire. A different view there. We'll get her back on here soon as well. What do you think, Paul? I mean, the news flow. I mean, Jobs Day Friday. We've hardly talked about it.
We've hardly talked about it, and a lot of folks are. The economists are telling us don't read too much into this.
Yeah,
we had
I'm
some hurricanes, we had some strikes
Yeah.
and things like that. So don't read too much into it. The Fed is unlikely to read too much into it as well. So, but again, earnings this week, Tom. That's probably what's going to be the key driver here. So we'll start today after. We've had a bunch today, but after the close. Carol Master and Tim Stenovic, they'll be all over it.
Yeah, is Carol back? She had the same plague I had, I think.
Oh, did she? Yeah, she's back. She's back.
Group plague.
Yep.
Thank you to all helped out there. David Gura. Did Damien darken the door? Is he out?
We had a bunch of people in it. I mean, they're trying to fill in for you, Tom, but it's a tough thing.
Stay with us. We got a lot of coverage to come. We're doing Tom Petty today. Keep it simple. Mr. Petty.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo on assignment. John Tucker in for Lisa Mateo. Oh, my word. It is a politically charged landscape. Out on YouTube. Thanks for following us on YouTube live chat. Always interesting. Deeps comes in. I play Free Fallin' by Tom Petty.
Sure.
And I'm being branded playing bearish music.
Bearish music.
Bearish music. We're going to play Up, Up, and Away by The Fifth Dimension here, which John Tucker's the only one in the room that remembers that song. Don't give up the day job. That's what they say to me. Anyways, Deep, thanks for that. It was bearish music with Tom Petty, Free Fallin' as well. Earnings season out here, Paul, and of course a big one tonight. I guess Carol and Tim will break that out. Google, Alphabet tonight.
Yeah, we'll talk about that digital advertising space here, which has been, as Mandeep Singh from Bloomberg Intelligence earlier was saying, remains very, very strong, solid double-digit kind of growth in that digital ad spending, which fuels the Googles and the Facebooks of the world.
Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, brought to you by BNY. BNY's expertise and insight can help clients achieve their ambitions. Visit BNY.com. Again, visit BNY.com. We thank them for their support. Futures deteriorated a little bit, -11. Is there weight to the tape, Paul? What do you think? It's just like noodling.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll get some more earnings as they come out, but I think earnings have generally been okay. The bank started out real strong, and corporate America's coming pretty decent.
And now inside baseball. Will the Yankees score in the first inning? We'll have to see on that. Inside baseball with Catherine Kaminsky, Chief Research Strategist, Alpha Simplex. It's a wing of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, sharpens pencils for Simon Johnson on a regular basis. Katie, I'm sorry. Good morning, Wells Wilder. If I take exponential moving averages on a daily unit chart and I throw in ADX DMI and I look at a beautiful first cross over the second derivative, first cross.
Oh, boy.
I'm getting back to October 7 and a massive call on trend higher yields. This on the 10-year real yield. Did the weather change October 7th?
It has been changing. I mean, this month has been tricky. I mean, we've been talking for a while about the long trend in fixed income, and that's the long trend that didn't come to fruition. And so you've seen some pretty strong movement against those positioning and yields. We would have never guessed that yields would have been this high thinking about September or August.
Right. Are we in a new trend? I mean, is the elegance of that mathematical malarkey I just mentioned, does that suggest a new trend of higher yields?
So I would say, and this is a good question, because what you're seeing is you're definitely seeing on the shorter end, you're seeing particularly for the US, more of an indication towards higher for longer and shorter signals. It's still early just because of the time horizons that trend generally is measuring those signals,
Sure.
but we have seen a wave of change.
So, Katie, in the equities market, again, up 22% here. I mean, do I start getting concerned about valuation here? I mean, my earnings are pretty solid, but boy, at 21, 22 times earnings, how concerned should I be?
Well, this is a good question because I think that's been the biggest surprise to me on the technical side is that you've seen the one asset class that has been the strongest in terms of its recent momentum and trend signals has been equities. I always get nervous going into elections or any binary event because really oftentimes the trend tells you something about where we're going. So I became a little bit more positive on equities, even though I agree that some of the real fundamental indicators are a little bit more questioning whether or not it could be, temporary.
All right, so let's switch over to then. Well, actually, let's just finish out on the equity side here. What have you seen so far in earnings season, and what do you think the market still maybe needs to see coming out of this earnings season to support constructive equities?
Well, I mean, if you look at the recent data, earnings have been relatively strong. GDP numbers are coming out strong. So there's a lot more indications that the US economy is relatively resilient and strong. I think once we get through this election season, we're going to have a little bit more clarity on that. But generally, the direction has been positive. And if we continue to spend, maybe it isn't, there's less of a recession risk. And that was part of the issue in August, pricing in recession risk. And there seems to be dissipating.
Katie Kaminsky, which chart shows best trend discipline right now?
I would say that, if you look at any sort of moving average 200-day, 100-day, you're going to see that equities are looking strong. It is not the case for many other asset classes, but I think my favorite trend this year is gold. It doesn't really matter which trend indicator you use. It's been a really interesting continual upward move for gold. So that's one to kind of mention.
Come on, give us a target. I mean, come on. Simon Johnson would give us a target on gold. Katie Kaminsky, 4,000?
Oh, that's high. I mean, I don't like to pin down numbers, obviously.
Katie, it's theater. Okay, this is not some nerd fest at MIT.
Above
3,000.
Sure.
Katie, how about on the fixed income space here? Katie, I mean, again, 2-year Treasury, 4.16%. That seems pretty hefty right there. Do I stop there or do I take some credit risk?
So, I mean, what I would say about fixed income, which is interesting to me, is that right now yields, if you really do think that yields, and we're going to have cuts and there's going to be pressure towards cuts, it looks like a good buy. The thing that keeps me questioning has to do with spending and inflation and sort of how people assess the impact of potential inflation on the yield curve. So shorter term might be a little bit more likely to be something that you'd go for. But longer term, I mean, there's still so much risk in terms of how we're going to navigate the yield curve.
How are CTAs doing? I mean, I read the hedge fund stuff and long short struggling and macro and all that, but trend followers, based on the last couple times we've talked, Katie, it's been a really challenging 2024. Do I get that right? What are they getting stopped out too quickly on too many things?
So this is exactly right. The certain asset classes that have worked well for trend followers has been equities, and it also has been idiosyncratic commodities. So things like gold, cocoa, copper, copper less actually. But really the monetary policy response and the volatility around that this year has created a lot of turbulence in the currencies and fixed income markets that have made trends very difficult to navigate, regardless of which metric you use.
So, Katie, the dollar has regained some strength here. What do you think's driving that, and where do we go from here?
So the dollar initially, this is where it's a hard trend because we basically have a V-shaped move in the dollar. The dollar was under pressure in the wake of anticipating cuts for the Fed. Then it backed off. Then the dollar is now looking good again. The U.S. economy is looking good. And the Fed is looking to be a little bit slower to cut rates. So the dollar is now back in favor. So there's a typical V-shaped move, which is not a great long-term trend.
Are you coming up with trend trades at Miracle of Science on Mass Ave, or are you doing it at Brick and Mortar, that craft bar up there? Where is Alpha Simplex writing up trend basic trades? Miracle of Science?
I like the Miracle of Science. It's a great, I don't know if you've been there before, but it's a great hub right in the middle of Cambridge. So I definitely take, they also have some other local MIT pubs like the Thirsty Ear and other places. So
yeah, there's a few selected ones as well. May the Cantab Lounge rest in peace. Thanks so much. Katie Kaminsky, brilliant. She's truly, folks, one of our most popular guests. I want to make this clear.
That looks like a fun place, the Miracle of Science.
All of MIT, Paul, is a fun place.
I can do that.
Eric Chemi once told me that basically he barred his way through college. He just went from bar to bar there.
Very good.
That's what Troy Gajewski did.
Yep.
I mean, that's how he got through MIT.
I'll check it out
Katie
next time.
Kaminsky's there.
We're going up to Boston soon, Tom.
We are.
Yep.
I believe we can, talk about that here in the coming days. Catherine Comiskey, Alpha Simplex, Bulletproof Academics, including her work at Sloan. Futures running green in the screen. Comiskey moving the NASDAQ into green. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. Vice President Kamala Harris plans to deliver her closing argument in the presidential race from Washington's National Mall tonight. Harris, along with running mate Governor Tim Walz, were in Ann Arbor, Michigan last night. The Democratic ticket making an appeal to young voters. The vice president, at one point, responded to a group of about a dozen pro-Palestinian protesters trying to interrupt her speech.
Listen, hey, on the subject of Gaza, hey guys, I hear you. On the subject of Gaza, we all want this war to end as soon as possible and get the hostages out, and I will do everything in my power to make it so.
Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump campaigned in battleground Georgia yesterday and mocked his critics.
My father always used to tell me, don't use the word, you don't ever use the word Nazi. And, it's incredible now. The way they talk is so disgusting and just horrible the way they talk.
Today, Trump will speak to reporters at his Mar-a-Lago mansion in Florida in about an hour from now. The Pentagon says it now has evidence that roughly 10,000 North Korean troops are training inside Russia and likely headed to the border with Ukraine. President Biden addressing reporters. Former President Donald Trump had several conversations with Vladimir Putin after Trump left the White House, which both have denied. The president also responding to North Korean troops inside Russia.
It's very dangerous, very dangerous. And the idea that Kamala's opponent is talking to Putin and discussing what should be done.
President Biden made his comments after early voting in Wilmington, Delaware. The Dodgers are a game away from sweeping the World Series. Los Angeles beat the Yankees 4-2. I know, man. It's like, come on, AL fans. Come on with me.
Okay.
By the way, New York Game 3. They lost that. So
Game 4 is tonight.
Tonight in the Bronx.
When's Game 5?
We better have a Game 5.
We better have a Game 5.
Yeah.
It's in the Bronx.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be in the Bronx.
I don't mean to interrupt. Excuse me.
No, I'm done now. I'm like you. I'm rooting for the Yankees.
The Dodgers, thank you, Ari, for that. Wednesday's Game 5. Do the Dodgers want to make it out to Game 6 to bring it back for the fans at Chavez Ravine? I don't think so. They want to win it here.
Get out of here.
Get out of Dodge and win it here.
I tell you who does want that, the TV execs. Because then you can sell more ads and, there's money in that.
That's exactly right. So let's get it back to L.A. some way, shape, or form.
Can
That's
I
the
plan. Manfred was on with the guys on Fox here yesterday, and they were pretty, good with them about the rule changes come. Can I just say that the way they change baseball, where you watch the World Series and Nomar Garciaparra is not going to step out of the batter's box 14 times, it's great. Yep. I mean, Stanton, who I adore, gets in there and he takes his swings.
Yep.
I know Tigers fans are like, who are you rooting for the Yankees? But hey, we got to support the AL, man.
AL. I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I excuse me. Dreaded New York Yankees, Paul.
Yep, you have to. I mean, their backs against the wall here. We'll have to see. They've got their starting pitcher going to go out against a bunch of relievers tonight, so we'll have to see how it plays out. But again, Yankees down 3. Did not see this coming. We're going to have more coming up for you in just a moment. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker, the Bloomberg Newsroom, with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Futures report brought to you by IBKR. Markets never sleep. Neither does the Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indexes, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. Google parent Alphabet's earnings due after the close expected to show long-term growth trends remain intact. They could also offer new information about any tailwinds they're seeing from AI. It's the first of the 5 of the Mag 7 stocks to report this week on the busiest week for earnings this quarter. Pfizer raising its guidance for the year. It reported adjusted earnings that beat expectations. Shares were up 1.5% pre-market, and Dow component McDonald's falling pre-market. Sales fell short of expectations in the third quarter, mainly because of weakness in the international markets. Dow futures down 179, the S&P E-mini futures down 12, NASDAQ futures down 5. Quick piece of data. Home price gains in the U.S. slowing in August. National measure of prices rising 4.2% from a year earlier. This is the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller, smaller than the 4.8% increase in July. And shocker, New York having the biggest increase with an 8.1% climb at prices, followed by Las Vegas and Chicago. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. I mean, it's really, we're like an island. Like maybe there's 2 or 3 other islands out there, but the real estate map of America, Paul, now is a jumble.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
there's
is.
no other way to put it.
Yeah, no, I mean, we saw so much growth during the pandemic in some of those Sun Belt markets, and Florida and Texas broadly defined, and some weakness. But now there's some rationalization, I think, going around.
Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, we want to know what you want to hear on Bloomberg Radio. We want you to help make shows like Bloomberg Surveillance. Even better, we need you to take our Bloomberg audience survey. How do you do it? You visit YouTube. It's growing every day, youtube.com/Bloomberg Podcasts. You click on the link to our profile or community section to take the survey. It's hosted by our partners, Material. We have nothing to do with it. It's just Material. They're doing the survey. I mean, there's piercing questions like, what's John Tucker doing and what's Michael Barr
more
doing?
kurtosis.
More kurtosis. That's what we need as well. Shane Foley's going, I can talk kurtosis. Right now on that survey, fill it out now. You can do that at youtube.com/Bloomberg Podcast. An important survey on the future of what we're doing each and every day. We migrate to Jane Foley. She is with Rabobank. And John Tucker brings up the third moment there, kurtosis, and the skewness of the market, I guess, to take another cross moment. Jane Foley, when you look at yen dynamics, when you look at euro-yen starting to ebb out here to a weaker yen, stronger euro, is there a skewness where you can make money?
Well, the skewness will come, I think, potentially after the Bank of Japan policy meeting on the 31st, so later this week. And that is whether or not we are told by Bank of Japan Governor Ueda whether or not there is the possibility of interest rate hikes, perhaps January, maybe December. But if he doesn't maintain a hawkish tone, then I think the yen could certainly be exposed to further vulnerability. But you know what? The euro is also pretty vulnerable because the ECB could cut interest rates by 50 basis points. So I don't think necessarily if I was going to be selling the yen, I'd be necessarily buying it back against or buying the euro instead.
So if you're going to make a jump condition on yen weaker, how do you play it against? Dollar? Do you play it against sterling? Do you play it against Aussie? How do you do that?
Well, the dollar is potentially the safest bet for the next few days. But of course, then we have the US election. This week, we also have the UK budget tomorrow, and that could go against sterling. So there's an awful lot of news about to come up. Aussie, yeah, you know what? I think you probably could buy the Aussie against the yen because the news in Australia is probably going to be a little bit more stable, a little more steady in the next few months. We know that the RBA isn't going to do anything on interest rates for a while, maybe not until, our spring here in the Northern Hemisphere, until maybe May or so. They may not cut interest rates until then. And the fundamentals are good. So, I think you probably could buy the Aussie against the yen.
So, Jane, I'm just looking at the Bloomberg Dollar Index up, almost 4% just over the last month or so. I mean, what's going on there? Where do you see value out there in the marketplace vis-a-vis the dollar?
Well, I think there is going to be the possibility of a few wobbles dependent on the election result, because, there's a couple of different things driving the dollar. And the main thing is the resilience of the US economy. And I think that was dictated after that payrolls report at the start of this month. But also, retail sales was decent. The markets decided, oh, you know what, the Fed doesn't need to cut interest rates as much as we thought that they might. So hence you have the dollar strength. But on top of that, of course, there's been the popularity of the Trump trade. This speculation, if you like, about a red wave and about how good this might be for growth, but also, of course, the tariffs and how inflationary tariffs might be and what that could mean for the Fed. But of course, we don't know who's going to win the election next week. And if it is a Harris win, although I could say the dollar could still make gains into the medium term, I would imagine the initial reaction would be to sell the dollar, because the market would have to backtrack on some of those Trump trades.
I mean, away from the politics, is a constructive view on EM, and this is something folks Rabobank's really good at. Are you long EM versus dollar? I don't understand how you can commit to that. Or do you just say resilient dollar out 6 months, out 6 years?
I think resilient dollar, very long term is a good bet. But obviously, if we do have an awful lot of tariffs put up in the US, that theoretically should start to hinder growth over certainly that 6-year period that you've just mentioned. In fact, if you look at some of the IMF forecasts last week, could actually start to hinder growth into 2026. So from that point of view, I structurally, I think the dollar is very well placed, but there are those uncertainties about how tariffs, if they are significant, how they could influence growth longer term.
Rounded up, DXY 105.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Absolutely. We've seen some that strength on the U.S. dollar just in the last month. How about pound sterling here, Jane? What's the feeling in the marketplace about sterling?
I think it's got a difficult time on its hands if it's going to try and vie with the dollar right now. And I think that's what we've seen this month. But if you look against the euro, then I think sterling can probably do better, because, we have this scenario whereby the ECB is expected to maybe even cut interest rates 50 basis points in December. The Bank of England isn't as dovish. And from that point of view, I think if the ECB were to cut more aggressively, it sort of exposes the euro to Germany's weaknesses, its structural flaws, and that, I think, could allow sterling to outperform the euro.
Paul and I are just doing this because we're tourists, okay, on cable, okay, on sterling as compared to U.S. dollar. The Chancellor of the Exchequer's, this is a telegraph, of course, against the Labour government, to hit 700,000 working people with a 400-pound tax rise. Can you give me big figure weakness on British pound versus U.S. dollar?
Well, I actually don't think we're going to get, big figure weakness, but we could certainly get some slippage. And the reason for that is if you look at long-term or, historical averages for cable, actually it's around about 150. So although sterling is the best performer G10 currency this year, it's sort of still recovering from that weakness after the Liz Truss fiasco 2 years ago. And I think it could certainly backtrack to some degree against the US dollar, but I don't think we're going to get significant weakness. But of course, that depends on whether or not the Labour government manages to convince the investor community that it is still very pro-growth.
I got good news. We're out of time, because if we weren't, I'd be asking you about the future of Tottenham. I mean, the Tots. I mean, they're playing Aston Villa. We got Ira Jersey on tomorrow just to talk about Tots, Aston Villa here on Sunday. I mean, we don't have to go to Jane Foley on this. We'll do that with Jane Foley next time. There we are, Jane Foley with Rabobank. The resilient dollar, I mean, it's the story of our lives.
Yeah,
frankly.
I mean,
back to
show me the bear case for the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
I haven't seen one.
Dead on. Futures at -12, the VIX 20.19. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Nice poll out there for you to take to tell us what to do. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker here, the Bloomberg Newsroom with the opening bell report, being brought to you by JP Morgan Asset Management. Stay informed on today's fastest growing investment vehicle with the new guide to ETFs. Visit jpmorgan.com/ETF Insights to learn more. And there you have it, the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Right out of the gate, we're lower. S&P 500, 8 points lower. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 171 points. And as we wait for the first trades on the NASDAQ right now, just coming across, NASDAQ 100 is up just about 15 points. Some of the individual shares on the move. You have McDonald's after its earnings report, a little disappointing on the sales front. That is up just about only 1 point, and ahead of their earnings after the regular close of regular trading today. Shares of Alphabet parent, Google parent Alphabet, those shares up 0.8%. And after their positive earnings report, shares of Pfizer in the early going up 0.1%. We check the markets for you all day long. Right here on Bloomberg Radio, I'm John Tucker, and that is your opening bell report. Hold it, Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. Thanks so much for the response. The love notes, the hate mail, all that we've gotten today. And in the political firestorm of America, Paul and I are committed to trying each and every day to be measured and balanced on that. We had David Malpass in, of course, running for Senate on the Republican ticket. I believe, Paul, it was 14 years ago. And I got a firestorm of response, both pro and con.
Okay.
On that. So we dive in again. Heidi Crebo-Rediker is an important academic out of Dartmouth and LSE, writing up in foreign affairs, among other points. And we ask her for conversation today. The ellipse has a symbolism in Washington. Heidi, what is the ellipse?
So, I mean, it's right on the Mall in Washington, D.C., and it's where Kamala Harris is going to really give her big closing argument tonight. But it's also the place where Donald Trump gave his January 6th very infamous speech in 21 to the insurrectionists who then went down and stormed the Capitol building. So as we're in this period of closing arguments, you know, it's an important backdrop.
Are we closing too early? I would think the drama would be Sunday or Monday before Tuesday, November 5th. But is this like the norm that we're closing before Halloween?
So I think whatever she says in this closing is going to be overshadowed by something really tectonic that happened when Donald Trump gave his quote unquote closing arguments in Madison Square Garden. And I actually think, whereas I almost always talk about the impact of tariffs or immigration on economic on labor markets, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the politics of what just is happening as we are speaking right now, because I think we could be looking at the October surprise and not realize it. So bear with me as I talk a little bit about what the implications of Trump's opening act on floating islands of garbage, referring to Puerto Rico, actually means right now for the campaign. This is really all about Bad Bunny. And I know, Tom, that you probably are a huge fan of Bad Bunny.
I am. And even more importantly, he's a huge, good morning, Bad. I mean, he's listening to Bloomberg Surveillance. We've gone back and forth.
That's Mr. Bonet to you.
Excuse me, Mr. Bonet. Okay, continue, Heidi, here. We got a couple minutes left because we got some breaking news. But Heidi,
all right,
explain
so
to us
bear
what
with
you
me.
saw at Madison Square Garden.
So on the back of the comments on Puerto Ricans that were just awful, Bad Bunny, everybody was waiting for Bad Bunny to come out and endorse. He's one of the biggest superstars in the world for a very important demographic. It's the Latino demographic. A lot of them are undecided voters right now. And in Pennsylvania, that all-important state, it actually has about 500,000 Puerto Ricans. It's the third largest population outside of the island. And he went and not only endorsed Kamala Harris, but so did Jennifer Lopez and Luis Fonsi and Ricky Martin. 400 million social media subscribers with all of those. And they went out and said it wasn't just about backing Harris. It reflected back to when Trump abandoned the island after Hurricane Maria, tried to block aid after the hurricane, and the whole, we're harkening back to throwing paper towels, which were such insult to the people who had just gone through a horrific, devastating hurricane. Just a couple of numbers that I'll leave you with. Not only do we have the 500,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, but we have over 100,000 Puerto Ricans in Georgia and North Carolina. Remember, Georgia in 2020 had a margin of 11,000 votes. You've got over 100,000 Puerto Ricans there. And social media right now on these comments that Trump, that the Trump campaign made, and the fact they haven't actually taken back, social media is on fire right now. So Bad Bunny, you should pay attention to Bad Bunny, and to the undecided Latino voters. Allentown, where Donald Trump's heading today, 54% Latino. So, good luck to him there. It'll be interesting, but I do think this might actually be the October surprise.
Heidi, thank you so much. Heidi Crebo-Rediker with us here, with all of her good work there, with the Council on Foreign Relations as well. I should say, Paul, this has slipped by in the earnings. I got one headline: McDonald's says $5 meal buyers visit more frequently. John, would you like to comment on that?
What does $5 at McDonald's get you?
I don't know, half a French fries. It's working.
Sunday?
I don't know.
It's working.
$5 Sunday if the machine's
Jet
working.
Blue. John, did you cover this? I don't even know if you did or not. But
I'm glad you're listening to my report.
Well, I was signing autographs. I'm looking, Paul, here at JetBlue down 5%. It's just is it a train wreck? Is not the right word.
I don't know. I think when I talk to the George Fergusons of the world, he covers the airlines for Bloomberg Intelligence. He says, if you're United, you're Delta, you're these big global airlines, you're generally in pretty good shape these days. Travel's holding up. But if you're some of the more regional airlines, you're facing some problems here, because if you don't have the right markets, you could see some weakness out there. So JetBlue shares tumbled after a worse than expected sales forecast that suggests the recovery is going to take some time. Now, remember, JetBlue has been trying to grow through acquisition. Spirit Airlines, the federal courts blocked that deal. And they also broke up a joint venture with American Airlines, which would have expanded kind of their opportunities. So, the regional airline business, it's always been a tough business.
25 to 5, 25 to 6.
Yep.
Over 10 years, their return is negative 5.5%. Isn't there where a management basically wants to put them out of their misery?
I don't know. This
negative 5.5% per year.
Here's what I don't buy. JetBlue cited challenges this quarter from an election-related travel decline. I have never heard of that. An election-related travel decline?
Full disclosure and thank you to United. Francine had the Gulfstream, so I had to take United coming back from FCO. Every seat was taken.
Yeah.
They were, the first thing they did, Paul, they said in Italian, it was so wonderful, and then in English, it was like a nightmare. We're going to pay you not to take this flight. That's how crowded it was.
Yeah, exactly. So, so again, some of these regional airlines definitely facing some challenges. But they had that revenge snapback in traveling post-pandemic, and now they're trying to
but that was a pandemic.
Yeah,
and
so now they're
come on, the peak of that is 20-6 on JetBlue.
Yep. So it's interesting. So industry capacity reductions are put in place after the summer travel kind of waned here. So the industry's trying to, I guess, match capacity with demand out there. Always a challenge. But again, it just shows you day to day, the airline business is such a tough business. And then, one of your biggest costs is fuel, and you have little to no control over that.
So I got a busy day. I got the surveillance nap.
Good.
I got to take. I mean, I've been a little under the weather. Get the surveillance nap in. Then I got to go home and listen to Bad Bunny just so I can be up to speed. You're laughing at me?
Yes.
Could be a Bad Bunny.
Can you name me one Bad Bunny song?
No, I cannot. I can say that I get wonderful snippets from some people, mostly out on the left coast, at like 10 cent. Sent me a thing once. That was fun to, I have never listened to 10 cent.
10 cent?
The Bad Bunny.
Okay. All right.
I'm
they
not
the demo.
We got a lot of people that listen. We say good morning out there, and particularly good morning to Lucas Shaw, who has just become a lodestone for Bloomberg in Los Angeles, writing on the entertainment business. Next time Lucas is in, we'll talk about
newsletter, all kinds.
Bad Bunny in a constructive way. Down -197. With our news in New York City, he knows Bad Bunny, Michael Blarg.
Oh my! Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. Former President Trump will address reporters in just over 20 minutes from his Mar-a-Lago mansion in Florida. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris will pledge to Americans that she will work to improve their lives. 1 week out from the election day, Harris will make her address from the Ellipse near the White House. Authorities are investigating fires at early ballot drop boxes in Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, Washington. Bloomberg's Mike Shepard reports from Washington, D.C., that it's adding to concerns over a contested election after next Tuesday.
Even outside of those incidents, which are the very thing that election officials and, from the national level on down have been warning about, we need to brace for a contested election and a chaotic one potentially, too. There have been concerns and warnings about the potential for violence and upset, too. So we will have to be on our toes next week, really through this weekend and next week.
Bloomberg's Mike Shepard in the nation's capital. Police in Minneapolis say the homeowner, allegedly shot by his neighbor, had called police 19 times to complain about threats from the man who is white. Homeowner Davis Muturi, who is black, says he was trimming a tree outside his house last week when suddenly he was shot and collapsed. He spoke from his hospital bed.
It was a very traumatic moment. Not only shot, but shot in your neck, and the people are fighting to save your life.
The suspect, John Salchuk, is due in court today. And as we know, the Dodgers, they won Game 3 of the World Series against the Yankees. Los Angeles won 4-2 and are on the verge of sweeping New York. The Yankees' Anthony Rizzo spoke after last night's game.
It's not going to be easy for sure, but no, we gotta pull some inspiration from somewhere. So it's happened before, teams come back before, and it's going to sting tonight, but tomorrow when we show up, we'll be ready to play.
Game 4 tonight in the Bronx. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
I couldn't figure out how Bad Bunny clicked in, and then I remembered it was the Super Bowl in 2019. That's where the 49ers lost. And, the bar
Mrs.
house
Barr
was
loves
grim.
you.
Yeah, it was grim as well. And Shakira's going on. I mean, I'm loving Shakira. And there's this guy on stage, Yo hago lo que me da la gana. I nailed that, right?
Whoa.
And it's the bad with Daddy Yankee. And I remember this. I mean, they were, Shakira gave him some FaceTime in the Super Bowl as well.
By the way, can I give a shout out to Alex Rodriguez, who are great host of The Deal. Yeah. He is killing it left and right. He was on Good Morning America, and he said tonight the pressure's on the Dodgers. And he's got a point. because, you trying to sweep a World Series, that's hard.
Yeah. I put out a thing last night. Jeter threw out the first pitch. And, they're bouncing around. The egos are bouncing off the wall, and Ortiz and all that. And this is how quick A-Rod is. I think Jason learned this on the deal. Is he's going, yeah, I'm throwing out the ball for game 8. And that's just classic A-Rod there. Derek threw out the first ball last night as well.
Yep. So we'll have to see. But it's a big game.
Who's going to throw out the ball tonight? Any idea?
I don't know. I'm busy, so don't ask. So I'm not leaving it short. Game starts at 8:08. That's way past my bedtime.
Yeah, it is. I wish it started at 7. I think they're missing a huge hunk of the nation there as well. Michael Barr, thanks for the incessant Dodger updates. Dow -106, right on the screen of VIX 20.24 from New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. The major stock averages mixed right now. Ahead of the earnings report after the close, shares of Google parent Alphabet, they are up 0.5%. This is the first of the 5 members of the Magnificent 7 cohort reporting this week. You mentioned this before because it is really a standout this morning. Shares of JetBlue down 13.5%, tumbling the most in more than 2 months, worse than expected sales forecast. Fourth quarter revenue, that's going to be down as much as 7% from the year ago period. Some of the other movers, D.R. Horton sinking, that was down as much as 14%, weaker than expected homeowners. And then you have Pfizer rising on its bullish outlook, and then McDonald's shares right now, they are up 0.2%, even after they reported sales that fell short of expectations in the third quarter. That followed weakness in some of the international markets. Right now, we have the S&P 500 down 11 points. That's down 0.2%, 58.12 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average 157 points lower. The Nasdaq 100 5 points higher right now. The 2-year yield is close to 3 basis points higher. 4.16 there. The 10-year, the benchmark, 4 basis points higher. That's a 4.32. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Well, John Tucker, thanks so much. One of our themes into 2025 is the garbage system known as the retirement plan of America. It is a train wreck, whether it's actual assumptions of Social Security, what we're seeing at Boeing, where the workers are demanding a return to what we knew 40 years ago. And part of this is just speaking to people, actually doing research on what we're doing, where we've been, and of course, looking out to where we're going. Alicia Manel retires at Boston College. We're efforting Dr. Manel to get her on. She's had so much to do with this. Roger Ferguson, T.A. Kreff, but there's new leadership, and it comes from Mercer, and it comes from the CFA Institute. Full disclosure, I'm a member of the CFA Institute. Margaret Franklin, head of the CFA Institute, the ongoing shift to defined contribution pension plans, think 401k, introduces a host of new financial planning challenges. Joining us now, Chris Mahoney with Mercer, Global Defined Benefit Contribution Leader at Mercer. Your report, Chris, is eye-opening, like jaw-dropping. Let me cut to the chase. What is the Netherlands doing right that America is failing at?
Well, this is the 16th year we've done this, and the Netherlands has retained its top spot or returned to the top spot. It bounces around amongst a couple of countries at the top. I'd say the key difference are probably four things. They have better protection at the lowest end of the pension spectrum. So for people who have low income, they replace a better amount of that in retirement. But the key thing that's different is that they actually have almost all of their people covered, not just by government plans, but by employer plans. And the level at which those employer plans produce an income in retirement is much higher. And that's the last thing. The third thing I'd mention is leakage. So when you enter their system, you can't take the money out mid-career to do something else with it. It actually stays in the retirement system. The last thing is that when you get to retirement, they make sure that you have an income stream, regardless of whether it's a defined benefit or a defined contribution plan. At the moment you retire, it converts to a stream of income, and that stream actually increases with cost of living. So those would be the four things they do that we don't do. Now, we have done things in the recent past to make it better, and I'm happy to talk about that. Secure 2.0 passed just a couple of years ago, and it put auto enrollment into 401k plans. When you start with an employer, they have a new plan, you automatically go into that plan. Still voluntary, you can opt out, but you go in and they slowly increase your contribution till you're contributing at a rate that will actually produce a pot of money at retirement. But there's more we could do in Secure Act 3.0. It's a bipartisan effort. I know in these times it's hard to imagine, but 2.0 passed with bipartisan support, and 3.0 is under discussion. So lots that we can do to make it better, and we're on a path.
So, Chris, can you frame out for our listeners and viewers kind of what the gap is between kind of where our retirement systems are, where our savings are, and maybe what the need is? How big of a problem is this, and how many people does it affect?
I would say approximately 50% of all employees have access to some sort of retirement plan in their employer environment. So that means we have 50% of the people who don't. That's a pretty significant gap, and that's what we need to actually fill. The other thing is how much people participate when they go into a defined contribution plan. I thought the quote that you gave is right. It's not that it's a bad type of plan. It just puts a lot of pressure on individuals and employers to do things to make sure that people actually get into them and stay in them.
Chris, how do you respond? I mean, come on, we did ERISA 74, and on we go, and everyone's doing a 401k. It's Peter Orszag now over at Lazard saying we got to have automatic opt-in, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But as you just said, to be kind, half the nation can't retire, which I think is about, based on my anecdotal evidence, that's about right. What is the to-do for the next Congress to help us enjoy saving more?
I would say expanding auto enrollment and auto escalation, exactly what you just said, the quote you just gave, that would make a huge difference. Increasing the minimums in Social Security, which would also protect the lower income group. Remember, the 50% are not evenly distributed through the income brackets. It's mostly devastating at the bottom. And so increasing the amount of support we have at the bottom.
I don't mean to interrupt, but this is the heart of the matter. Basically, Congress is saying the rich people can't do a 401k because they're already too rich. And so we're not going to change the rules because we don't want the rich to get richer. Meanwhile, half the nation is flat on their back. What is the method to get the politicians to meet with the Mercer CFA actuaries?
So we do meet all the time on the Hill. And as I said, 2.0 was bipartisan. 3.0 is already under discussion. The real answer is increasing access. I'll give you another example in 2.0 that I think was just the beginning of a process that could really change things. They introduced the concept of pooled employer plans. And so this is for, remember, an awful lot of employers in the United States are small employers. And this is a way they can band together to have 401ks at lower administrative costs, better outcomes, lower fees for their participants. These are the sorts of incremental changes that will make a difference. And by the way, we are seeing auto enrollment being added to private plans. And the increase in participation that we're experiencing is quite noticeable. The difference is not everyone gets that. So the more we can make it easy, the more we can make it cost effective and make sure that the fees are such that employees get a good benefit, the better. The difference, by the way, and I just want to point this out, in the Netherlands in the last year, they actually have shifted from a DB plan to a DC plan. It doesn't go into effect until 2028. But the style of plan is not the difference. Almost everyone, they're not mandatory, but almost everyone goes in to a private scheme in addition to the public scheme in the Netherlands. That's what we should aspire to, and that's what we should look for.
We're out of time. Chris Mahoney, don't be a stranger. We're going to do more of this into 2025 as well. She survived Irwin up at Dartmouth. I mean, that alone. If you survive Doug Irwin up at Dartmouth, that's great. Chris Mahoney, thank you so much. With Mercer and the CFA Institute, we'll get Ms. Franklin on, the president of the CFA Institute as well. I'm sorry, Paul. I think this is just a huge deal. I hear it anecdotally every single day. Is this whole, like the Boeing people are in an uproar.
Exactly.
And, you know, to be charitable, Ms. Mahoney was saying 50%. I don't think it's 50%. I think it's 70, 80% America can't get it done.
Well, I mean, I wonder what, you know, a lot of folks will say kind of jokingly at a cocktail party, well, Social Security's not going to be around when I need it. You know, but I don't know when that runs out of money, you know, and that's a big issue, how you fund that. And then we're like a lot of other countries, you know, we got people leaving the workforce more than they're coming into the workforce.
Sometimes good songs, you know, they come from adversary. I mean, you know, you're breaking up with Joe Walsh. That's, you know, it's harsh. You know, so Stevie was breaking up with Joe. And Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics was over at the house. And they said, okay, it's a great song, Dave, but you got to give it to Tom Petty to write. Tom Petty, Dave Stewart. Classic song. All because of Joe Walsh.